Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to get started because I'm going to start with a roll call for the Board of Governors and the WPCA. And by the time I'm finished with that, I think we'll probably have everybody with the correct credentials and on the Zoom, okay? Okay. So to establish a quorum of the Board of Governors, I'm going to take a roll call. Some of you know that we don't have a secretary of the association, so I act as temporary secretary. The roll call, Tim Larson.
Here.
John Mandracchia.
Here.
Jay Moynihan.
Here.
Mary Kate Reynolds.
Here.
Scott Rottinghouse.
Did you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
And Greg Simone. Okay, we have a quorum, and I sent Greg a text. Hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. If you're not muted already, could you please mute yourself, or Mary Kate as the co-host, if you can mute people, because the camera settings for some people will change if there's a dog barking or a TV on or whatever. If you don't know how to mute, if you put your mouse down to the bottom of the keyboard, you'll see a little microphone says audio. Click on that and you'll get a red line through it, and that will mute you. Tim Larson, I see your hand is up. Did you want to do the roll call for the WPCA?
I sure can, but prior to that, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining tonight. As well, it is our intention to record this meeting and then try to have this recording transcribed to a YouTube video package, and then have that presented out on our website. And if we have the ability to do that, we would also like to email this to each one of our members so that we have as much information as we possibly can to all of our members in an appropriate fashion. And so with that, just keep in mind, I guess, as we're communicating, you state your name and do all of those appropriate things. And where possible, try to keep your speaker muted so that we can sort of continually run the meeting, if you will, just for video purposes or recording purposes. So with that, John Mandracchia, this would be a roll call for the WPCA.
I'm here.
Jay Moynihan.
Yes.
Chris Sheldon.
Here.
Bob Palazzo.
Present.
Dennis Columbi.
Here.
Diane.
Yep, here.
And Tim Larson here.
And Jack Reynolds.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Jack
I'm here.
Reynolds. I checked your name off, Jack, as I was going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry
Any
about
other
that.
comments before I start the meeting formally?
I'm good.
Okay, well, this joint meeting of the Board of Governors and the WPCA is called to order at 7:12 p.m. Want to welcome everyone and thank you for attending tonight's joint special meeting, which concerns the most significant and expensive project to ever come before our association. Our two knowledgeable and distinguished guests, Attorney Brendan Sharkey and Kurt Mailman from Fuss & O'Neill, are here tonight to provide us with a wealth of information and participate in a question and answer session. Later in the meeting, I will read some basic ground rules to follow before the question and answer session commences. Please allow me to introduce our first guest, Attorney Brendan Sharkey, who serves as our outside counsel. Brendan Sharkey is a practicing attorney specializing in municipal law, land use, and regulatory matters. He currently serves as an assistant town attorney in Hamden and has represented the Old Colony Beach Club Association and its WPCA since 2020. Brendan served in the Connecticut General Assembly from 2001 to 2017, representing the town of Hamden. He retired after serving two terms as Speaker of the House and one term as the House Majority Leader. Mr. Sharkey also served as chairman of the Committee on Planning and Development, whose jurisdiction includes all matters relating to municipal and regional governance. Brendan is a graduate of Georgetown University and the University of Connecticut School of Law. In addition to his legal practice, he co-owns two companies engaged in renewable energy solutions in Connecticut and nationally. And Brendan, if you would please start with an overview of the voting process for the November 9th special meeting of the association being held via Zoom only to vote on the supplemental bond resolution. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Diane. I'll be brief and I'll just provide that guidance. It's important to recognize that the rules for holding meetings and of this type have obviously changed since COVID. And there are now statutes that are in place that govern the conduct of public meetings that are held exclusively via electronic equipment. Keeping in mind that the Old Lyme Shores is a municipality for the purposes of our statutes as a special act, as I'm sure you all know. So you I think already are aware of the call of the special meeting. This would be a special meeting that can be called by the chairman of the association. There was some question about, I think, whether the call of a special meeting required any kind of a vote by the Board of Governors. It clearly does not from the statute, because the charter actually provides the chairman, the president of the association, with the authority to call a meeting. So once the meeting has been called, there's a notice that's required to go out to all association members at least 5 days prior. And that is contemplated at this point. The agenda that's contained in the notice must be followed strictly. It cannot deviate from what is specified in the agenda. So it's not the time to bring up other extraneous items. The agenda itself is all that can be discussed in that context. When it comes to the actual meeting and the vote, it follows the normal procedure for the opening of a meeting, but there are some specific protocols that we would need to follow when it's entirely by an electronic means. First, the notice needs to announce that the meeting will be conducted solely through electronic means, so that everyone understands that that is the method by which the meeting will be held and by which the vote will be taken. And that meeting also must be recorded. And the notice should reflect to the members that the meeting itself will be recorded, so that they're aware of that if they were to participate. The other factor in an all electronic meeting, like a Zoom meeting of this kind, is that all votes, unless unanimous, all votes taken at that meeting must be by roll. They must be taken by roll. And so in another settings, perhaps in a larger municipality, the way that is typically done is that a person who's participating on Zoom must identify themselves by turning their camera on and identifying who they are and casting their vote individually. In this case, because the association voting privileges are limited to each property, not to each member, an individual who may be a member of the association, the voting rights are restricted to one vote, one property. So in advance of the meeting, whoever will preside and whoever the secretary of the meeting will be needs to have a complete list of all properties that are members of the association. And the way we're anticipating handling the roll call vote is simply, it will take some time, but by running through each property that is identified as a member of the association and calling out one person representing that property to cast the vote for the property, in essence. Going through each address within the association individually. And if there is, and I'm recommending that after the full list of properties have been run through, that those that had not registered to vote be called on again, just to make sure that they weren't missed in the course of the roll call, or if they came in late and what have you. Your own bylaws do allow for proxies. So there are a couple of other factors we should just be clear about. One of them is the notion of proxies. I think you've been advised already by correspondence from Diane that the typical process that you've used before for proxies will be followed. They need to be signed and notarized. If a third party is casting the vote by proxy, and that proxy vote must be cast by another member of the association. It can't be just a random third party whose claims to represent the individual property that is casting the vote. Those need to be received by the close of business on the Friday before. If we are having a Saturday meeting, we're setting a time limit for Friday at 5 o'clock before the meeting for receipt of those notarized proxies. And let's see, the other factor is we were trying to recognize the fact that not everyone is comfortable using Zoom or may not be familiar with using the Zoom format. So yet we don't want to exclude those who may be otherwise unable to attend. So if folks are going to participate by phone only, we're asking that those individuals identify themselves, identify the phone that they will use to call into the meeting, which can be then verified. So we're asking folks in advance to give an indication that they're not going to participate via the Zoom link, but rather by phone only, and what phone number they intend to use. So we can match that phone number with the property in advance, so we know that that person is legitimate. They have to identify their name and their property when the roll call is done, but we'll be able to cross-check to make sure that the number that person is using is legitimate, and that would all be done in advance. Once the roll call is done, a second time through, just to make sure that no one was missed, it follows a normal procedure, which is that the vote will be taken and tallied, and the vote will be announced at that meeting. And then whatever else might be on the agenda for that meeting can be taken up. But if that was the only item on the agenda, there's no further business, the meeting would be adjourned. So that will be the process that will be followed for the meeting itself. So I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have about that.
Brendan, it's John Mandraki. Just a question about, you said that if somebody gets a proxy vote, that they...
Yeah, I know. I figured that out.
If a member of the community can cast it on their behalf, does that person have to be on the deed, or can it be a family member, like a spouse who's not listed on the deed?
No, the bylaws allow for any other association member, as long as they're a member of the association, they can cast the proxy vote. It does not have to be an owner of the property.
So meaning resident.
Meaning resident. I mean, the definitions in the charter are that any individual over the age of 21 who is an owner of an interest in property within the association boundaries is considered a quote unquote member. So any member who fits that definition can serve as a proxy for the actual property owner. It does not have to be the property owner, him or herself.
I want to say that I think we interpreted it more strictly in the past after analyzing it, and it had to be a property owner, not just a member. Because only a member can vote, and only a member that has, that's on the deed that can vote. So if you're going to send a proxy, they have to have the same standing as someone who's entitled to vote, is how we had done it in the past.
That certainly covers it. Yes, I believe that's fine.
If someone has an issue with it, certainly we can visit that if they need more flexibility, but I think we'll stick with what we have in our prior proxies.
I've got a couple of questions. Is that okay? Whatever, maybe not.
Yes, Jay, that's okay. And I want to mention the format as far as questions go. We will take questions initially from board members and officers, then WPCA members, and then other members after
Sure.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a couple of questions, Counselor. Just so I understand the procedure, I appreciate your research of it. So you said that the basis for calling a meeting, a special meeting of the association, rested with the president. I'm assuming you're interpreting. I mean, I guess I'm a little confused. I looked at the charter because I have very little going on in my life, so I thought I would check and see. And I see section 6, which deals with the officers and talks about a special meeting, requesting a meeting not fewer than 15 members of the association. I saw some stuff in the bylaw that said that the president could call a meeting of the Board of Governors. I'm just interested in the specific reference point relative to your thoughts on calling a meeting and not having the Board of Governors vote establish the date of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking at a few things, include the bylaws and the charter, but also state statute.
Okay.
The protocols for calling a special meeting
Yep.
are not. It's not that in any municipality, we're not. The association is not really a board of selectmen in that sense. It's more analogous to a mayor, a strong mayor kind of governance. And in that context, the chief executive of the CEO of the municipality has the ability to call a special meeting. There's no specific provision that lays out how a special meeting may be called in either the bylaws or the charter. So certainly it's possible for a Board of Governors, if they choose to have a vote to call a special meeting, that can happen. But it's my opinion that the president of the association, who has the power to preside over the things that the association would otherwise do, which that's an ineloquent way of paraphrasing the charter. The presiding officer does have all the roles and responsibilities of a presiding officer under those circumstances. So that's how I reached the conclusion that it's sufficient for the president of the association to call a special meeting without the need for the Board of Governors to formally vote.
Thank you. Another question I have is, you said that the agenda cannot be deviated, but at our meeting in 2019, September of 2019, there were efforts made at the meeting to dealing with the 9.7 resolution to amend that document before a vote. Is it your view that no amendments can be made at the meeting, that it's simply an up or down vote?
No, I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not familiar with what happened to that
Okay,
meeting.
that's fine,
but
yeah.
The way that you describe it, no, that's perfectly acceptable. I mean, it's that other items cannot be added to an agenda of a special meeting. The item that's up for vote is subject to normal debate and amendments
Okay,
on the floor. It's that you can't add to the agenda another voting item.
okay,
Like, let's say this one would be for a bond resolution, but someone wanted to add to the agenda a provision about maintenance of the beach. I mean, those kinds of additions cannot be made to the agenda when a special meeting agenda has been set.
okay. And the other item I had, very quickly, I noticed the reference, again, because evidently I have no life, of the proxy being notarized. Does it need to be a Connecticut notary, or can it be a notary from another state? It doesn't say
Connecticut does,
specifically Connecticut, but
sure, yeah, Connecticut does recognize the notarization of documents by out-of-state notaries. So that's not a problem.
okay. And
In fact, it's funny you should ask, because just today I had something with my family about an item in New Jersey, dealing with a family, an item that we had to deal with as siblings that my parents own. So I went in Connecticut to get a notary to notarize the document, but it's being sent to New Jersey. So no,
Okay,
there's
great.
reciprocity.
So the proxy form itself, it will go out prior to the meeting? Is that how it works?
Yes, that would be the intent.
Okay, and how long before? I only ask because in my case, I'm not going to be available, which I'm sure will generate a tremendous amount of sadness, but I will be out, and I'm concerned about if there's an opportunity to vote or not. So I'm just, if you can, just a sense of when the proxy vote would go out and how that would work.
I would, I'll defer to Diane, but it's my
Sure.
understanding that the proxy would go out via email with the notice itself.
Okay,
Yeah, I hope to send the notices tomorrow
okay,
with the proxy, with the bond resolution, with a copy of the slides that are presented tonight. And the proxy form itself has instructions on it, and it offers to send an email to secretary@olimeshores.org if anyone needs assistance with anything.
sure,
If they have a question, like I'm in New Jersey, whatever they might, and I'll contact Brendan if need be. And it's pretty simple. We don't need the original. We will accept a copy, but it doesn't have to be notarized.
Sure.
And email it is fine. And if you don't have a scanner, you can it's only one page. You get a nice picture with your phone and you can send it that way.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate
You're
it. Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, any other board members or officers have questions for Brendan? Any WPCA members have any questions for Brendan? Okay, before we continue on the next agenda item, Brendan, I'm hoping that you can please address how the WPCA had hoped to allow for a second referendum seeking approval to award a contract for the sewer construction after the bids were received and we knew the actual contract cost. We had legal counsel recently advising us that the project should move forward without a second vote because there's a potential for some conflicting results that could create legal issues for our association with the other beach associations in the state, and that this vote is the only vote we're going to have to be presented for the membership for approval of the sewer project construction. And if it passes, that's the final approval. So would you like to give a little background about that?
Sure. With the caveat that I'm obviously not serving as bond counsel to the association, and the advice that was received was from Shipman and Goodwin as they were drafting the resolution and advising the board and the WPCA. But in the conversations that were had, the concern that was raised by bond counsel was that to bifurcate the vote on the bond itself from the separately from the ability of the board to proceed on the sewer project was going to, I think, the thing of bond counsel was that it was going to create a tremendous risk as to the viability of the project, and may actually expose the association to some questions by state authorities and others who are following what the association's doing here, primarily over the premise of what happens if you have two different votes, one for the bond and then one for the contracts to be awarded the funds from the bond. What happens if the second vote is different from the first? Which what do you do under those circumstances? I can say from my own experience in representing municipalities, I've never seen a bond authorization or a referendum on a bond authorization not include the ability to expend the funds approved for the project for which the bond is sought, because for just this reason, and that separating those two things out was going to create a lot of uncertainty as to what the bond is going to be for and what to do if a second vote did not match the first. I'll also say that I think, there, and I don't want to speak for the WPCA or the Board of Governors, but I think there was some interest in ensuring some or giving the members some assurance that if for some reason that when the bids come back and it somehow exceeds what the bond authorization is authorizing in terms of dollar amount, that at least the sewers would proceed, but that the other provisions that are contemplated from the bond resolution, namely the stormwater work and the street repaving, you'll notice in the bond resolution that was drafted by bond counsel, it does not include the authority, it does not grant to the Board of Governors the authority to expend funds for those two items, for the stormwater or the road improvements, without a vote of the membership to do so. The SOAR project itself is linked to so many other things that have a list of horribles that would occur, I think, if for some reason a second vote on awarding the contracts did not match the authorization for the bond. But given that the other two projects that are contemplated with those bond proceeds are going to be left to the membership to vote on separately. They are unique to the association and not tied as directly to all of the other parties that are subject to the consent decree and the on whom who are waiting for this vote for the Old Lyme Shores Association to authorize this funding. So I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but that I think that captures where the bond counsel's concern was resting, and why they pretty much insisted that the bond resolution include authorization to go to the Board of Governors to go ahead and expend for the sewers, but separate out the other two uniquely Old Lyme Shores projects that we think will be covered by the bond authorization, but may or may not, depending upon how the bids come in. I hope that answered that question.
I think that was a very thorough explanation. And I'd like to open for questions, and I
I'm sorry,
see
can I
Jay
ask-
Moynihan's
Thank you.
has his hand up, so
Ew.
we'd like to recognize you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions, I guess, Counselor. I'm just looking for, understand the vote. In Massachusetts, in municipalities, if you're going out for debt, like 6.8 or number that we're talking about here, it necessitates in Massachusetts a 2/3 vote, not a majority vote, for the bonding to be approved. Is it a majority vote here in Connecticut?
Yes, it's a majority vote.
Okay. And secondly, on the bond, if I'm asking this, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at spend a lot of time looking at the bond resolution, but maybe more than you wish you did. But what I'm interested in a little bit is if you could describe for the WPCA, the Board of Governors, and our officers and the people listening a little bit on the role, what each entity has as a role, because the way the bond resolution has read is it has a great deal of information with regards, and the president, Diane knows this, has a great deal of references relative to what the president will do this, the president will do this. There's a lot of talk about signing documents. There's various points of signing. Sometimes it says authorization, sometimes it doesn't. I'm just interested. I mean, I would ask this probably if I got up at a meeting, with regards to what the roles are of the different entities, or based on the bond resolution itself, does it really kind of just mean, and this is no disrespect for anybody, but does it just mean we have like, it's up to the president, and that there's really a limited role for the Board of Governors and WPCA? I'm just looking for kind of a pathway here to, as we move forward, to understand better the resolution, and if there are any questions of who can do things or what things are being done. I just am looking for a little bit of guidance on that.
Brendan,
Yeah.
Brendan, I want to tell you, before you start, that we did get counsel from bond counsel on this,
Okay,
because it was raised at a meeting. Jack Reynolds in particular raised it at the fall meeting. So I went to bond counsel about it, and Brendan, you can supplement what they
Well,
said.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
They said the other associations, we have more restrictions on ours because we added the treasurer in a few places that it had to be at least 2 officers, which they said, you know, compared to the other beach associations, that presents a potential obstacle, you know, for us moving forward as swiftly as the other beach associations can. They said what you can do as an association, and I would like to do this with our Board of Governors, is we can pass a policy. We can, they do not want us to change the bond resolution, but we can adopt a policy as an association as to what the president should be doing before signing documents. We can do that. But the president's authority, however it reads in that bond resolution, they do not want that changed. And that's all I
right.
can recall right now.
I'm raising it in part because when I served on the board before, and I raised a question with regards to the fact that the association had never taken a vote relative to an easement that was granted across Gorton Avenue. That is the proposed location of the bioxide facility, which is a component of this project. That the response was that the resolution allowed the president to grant easements on their own volition, as was one of the components of it. And so I'm just interested in trying to get a sense of what the parameters are relative to what different entities and roles are as we move forward. That's all. Thank you. Okay.
Diane, I think you're muted.
Yes, I was, sorry. Brendan, would
Okay.
you like to add anything?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, so I
didn't-
would
I didn't
suggest,
author-
Jay, that Jay, you please make sure you send me an email for the agenda for the Board of Governors to adopt a policy that puts limitations, that
Right.
says, this is how we're gonna do it as an association.
Is one final quick question. My understanding is, although I don't know the language, but where that's located, but my understanding is that the bond authorization of 6.8 million is predicated upon the state of Connecticut providing and agreeing and providing the documentation involving the $15 million forgivable loan, that is a requisite for the bond resolution. And I'm predicating that on a conversation I had with bond counsel on behalf of the WPCA. And my understanding of the way she spoke was that the bond author, if the state did not come through with the $15 million forgivable loan, that the bond authorization, this is the way I understood it, of whatever number would not have validity because it was predicated on the state providing the $15 million forgivable loan. Is that your understanding too, or is that the way I understood it from her? Or can we check it? Thank you. Because I think somebody's going to ask at some point.
Diane, can I ask a question, please?
I'd like to address finish with
Yeah.
Jay. Jay, I think what we'll do is that needs to be confirmed with
Yep.
bond counsel. You
Thank you.
asked that question, the resolution should have addressed it in the way that you just expressed. It should already cover that point, and it should be clear that if that doesn't come through, then the authorization,
Right.
it doesn't count because we won't have the money for it. So I think that's a very good point you raised. And I would
Thank you.
say what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the one that we have, the one that our bond counsel said is final as of yesterday. That will go out tomorrow unless something changes at the end of this meeting or tomorrow morning. And I'd like you to please take it and send your email to bond counsel. You have her contact information
I
and
do.
copy whoever you'd like on that, and copy Brendan too if you can. And then we'll get the answer, okay?
No, that's exactly it. Thank you, Diane. The other last point is in the early draft, and I talked to her about this. In the draft that I had looked at when I spoke to her at the end of August, I think, in the bond resolution, it did not refer to the amended resolution, which was done in 2019. It only referenced, I believe that the draft that I saw only referenced 2012. I don't know if that has changed in the process, but I'm just making reference for it so that if it needs to be referred to in the presentation to the association members, that's included.
Okay, again, I would include that in your email. I have to tell you that I've seen our former secretary, Joanne Gilland.
Yep.
She had to attach the bond resolution many times
Oh, yeah.
for the certificate of incumbency that
Yeah.
was required in conjunction with executing certain documents, I think for Clean Water Fund. And I've seen what she attached, and there was never anything from 2019 attached. So
No.
I don't know if the amendment, did it pass? Do we know for sure we have it as a vote and
Yes.
it passed and we have a
It
record of
passed
it?
on September of 21 of 2019.
Okay, so I don't know about that. Maybe if you could touch base with Joanne Gilland about it, if she has some information perhaps, and then brings
No
that
problem.
forward in the same email, so we could, in that one email, get bond counsel to reply. That would be
Just so
excellent.
it's all on the same page. Good.
Yeah, thank you for knowing that, because I
Thank
didn't,
you.
when I saw your email, I'm like, oh, that probably didn't pass. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jay?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay, and then I think we have someone else, Jack Reynolds, I think was next.
Diane, I appreciate your recalling some of that conversation about the resolution. I don't know what the new resolution from Shipman and Goodwin's like, but the last one, as you had indicated, and I went and read it, I think you were absolutely right. It authorized the president to be able to do a lot. I would strongly urge the Board of Governors to do policy or whatever to reverse that. Calling a meeting of the Board of Governors is simple. It can be virtual. The alternative is there's no public posting of a vote. Right now, if this passes, you'd be authorized or follow up another person if you don't continue as president. would be authorized to spend $16.5 million. When the first selectman's authorized to spend 2,400 or 2,500, that's a little extreme. But if it could be a vote, I think it would protect you and it would protect everybody from seeing a posting and seeing the vote. And Tim, I appreciate you having that second vote in there. I'm disappointed to hear that they're trying to forbid that.
Permitted.
On the
Yeah.
other hand, the alliance, which consists of 4 members, and Tim would be our representative, I would assume, as the chair of the WPCA, has to vote to extend any or to grant any contracts. So I'm not sure that while the association may not have a second vote, we might have that control through the alliance vote and through Tim. And I would assume Tim would have, Tim, I would assume there'd be conversations within the WPCA before you through the alliance approve it. Any one person has to be unanimous. So any one person can stop the procedure, which is probably more effective or efficient than the association doing it anyway.
Thank you. Jack, I want to ask, the bond council already opines on what you just mentioned, and you mentioned at the fall meeting, Board of Governors should vote. If you want them to give their view again, I would say, if you can get together with Jay and add, send him your question so he could add it to his email. In other words, let's just send one email if we can to bond council and coordinate it all at once. So far we have 3 issues, okay?
I'm happy to do that. I just think the key there is it should be posted and the community should know there's going to be a decision. And if it's
Okay,
any
well, you
more than
propose it how you'd like it to be
Okay.
and let them come back on it. Thank you.
Diane had a quick question for Brendan.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Hey, Brendan, Bob Palazzo, speaking. Just want to get a clarification when you were talking about the bond resolution. The bond resolution for the 16.8 is to cover all of the construction, right? The sewer, the drainage, the water in total, correct? So the way I thought I understood what you said was that if you approve the 16.8 million and the sewer part of it was, let's say, 12, and the other remaining work ended up being over the 16.8, you would still go ahead with the sewers and maybe as much money going towards the other roads. And then after that, would there probably be an assessment of additional cost to finish the rest of the work? I'd like to get a clarification on that, because I was a little kind of misunderstood what you were talking about there.
Sure. And again, I would I would defer also to Diane and Tim to some degree, but yes, I think the intent of this is that that the bond resolution is intended to cover all 3 phases of what is intended for the association. 1, the sewers as part of the common the common scheme that's involved with the other associations, completing the sewer project. 2nd, stormwaters for Old Lyme Shores itself. 3rd, road repaving. What the bond resolution expressly states, though, is that there won't be a second vote on the sewer portion. So there's a bit of a fail-safe, if you will. If the bids come back way over what is anticipated, the sewer project will proceed, assuming the sewer project doesn't come back, over what's been authorized. And then the association can decide what to do if, say, the sewer portion of the project is over what was budgeted. If there are remaining funds left in the bond authorization, that they can be applied to the other 2 phases of the project. But that's a decision that would be made ultimately by the association members in a separate vote.
Okay, that's a little concerning to me, because if the sewers turned out to be up to use up our entire 6.8 million, we're not going to have any other additional funds for the road, the drainage, which means we're going to be still out of pocket for another $10 million, possibly. So that could be $26 million. Is that correct?
Well,
I think that's correct.
sure, it
right?
could be, you know, I mean,
Okay,
we
so-
don't know, is the
Yeah, all
answer.
right. Well, that's a problem because when I voted for this resolution for to go forward, that's not the way I understood it to be. That's not the way I understood it. It was never explained it to be that way. And that's extremely upsetting to me. I have to tell you. And I think everybody listening on this thing who is aware of this now should be extremely concerned. Extremely concerned.
Okay, I'm gonna recognize, thanks, Bob. I'm gonna recognize Tim Larson. He has to unmute himself. Go ahead, Tim.
Did I do that right?
You did, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, everybody. Inasmuch as that the resolution or the consent order requires the Beach Association to handle the sewer project. I say this in general terms, that the stormwater part of this is solely the obligation of Old Lyme Shores Beach Association, inasmuch as that we calculated what we believe is the total cost of the projects. We heard from members that questions that are attached at the end of Kurt Mailman's thing is, why are we going out to bid if we don't know how much money we have? By approving this, going out to bid and understanding where we are, we will know exactly where we are. The bids would come in at, a certain number. And then in theory, we would know what the sewer project would cost against the 16.5, and then make a determination against going out to say, okay, we've covered the sewer obligation for the consent order. There is still some room left to do the stormwater runoff and or the roads. And then we would go back and say, okay, do we just want to do the sewers, or do we just want to, or can we add, do we want to use the additional leftover money to support the stormwater runoff? So in fact, we would have an idea of what that number was, have approval, if you will, up to the capped amount, and then it would be the association's decision as to whether or not we went for the roads. I think Chris Sheldon will tell you, as we in the next part of the slides with the Fuss and O'Neill, what the differentiation would be from what the calculations were. But offering the opportunity for members to say, we're only going to concentrate on the sewers at this point because that covers our obligation with the consent order. We then know what the cost of the stormwater runoff program would be. Do we vote again to approve that segment of it? And that seemed to be the rationale for how we were going to approach it. And we learned that, obviously, with questions with bond counsel and so forth. So that's my sentiment on that.
Thanks, Tim. I think what Bob Palazzo may be saying is, well, wait a minute, that's when we look at the 6.8 million, we're looking at that as including stormwater and roads. But now what you're saying is you could just do only the sewer for the 6.8, leaving us zero for the other things. And it's too much money to allocate for only the sewer. So I don't know, Bob, if it's possible to put within the resolution and sort of like a cap just on the sewer project. And that was, I think, satisfy what you're saying, if I'm interpreting it correctly.
Well, I think we have to have some kind of fail safe in there because we don't want to get involved in a project that's going to be a huge overrun. I think that's we've talked about that in the past, and I thought what we discussed was that we were going to get these prices so we can then determine whether we're going to do the sewers privately or under the prevailing wage. But those are things that it's going to take a vote. I don't know how you can go to a bond council, get prices on all of this work in total, and then not do some of it, and not have a vote, because somebody's gonna have to make a decision. The association should have some involvement in making a decision of whether we're not gonna do roads anymore, or we're not gonna do any drainage anymore. You know, there are things that we don't even know of how it's gonna affect the beach, what these outfalls are gonna be, how that's gonna affect us. It could interrupt our continuation of the beach. Those are things we don't even know yet. There were a lot of unanswered questions about what we were gonna do when we did this bond resolution. And we went forward with this based on the notion that we were gonna have the ability to fine tune this thing. If this passed, to fine tune it, so we could get what we need. The most important thing is we get what's best for this association, not just throwing out a set of plans that's already done because it's already done.
Thank you. Tim, I'm gonna recognize you again, please. You can unmute yourself.
Sure,
Thanks.
thanks. Thanks, Bob. And I agree. And I think the fact that I think we'll learn more through Kurt Mailman's presentation, but I think under the circumstances that we have up against the consent order, that is the priority of this funding. And the fact that we have a price, if you will, or an estimate, the fact that once we've gone out to bid and once we understand what the runoff, the stormwater runoff and roads would be, we could then, we go to our members and say, we basically have covered the sewer project. We also have money to go forward on the stormwater runoff, et cetera. Do we go forward with that or do we not? Because we're trying to provide, there was an affordability question that has been passed around, and you'll see in Chris Sheldon's presentation the delta between the stormwater and the sewer project and the stormwater. And I think we're in good form. I think this process will give members an opportunity to actually see what the numbers come in on the bond, and then give authorization to proceed. We also know, as part of this arrangement, that we're going to have to go out and find private financing for some portion of this. And again, having this out to bid and having those numbers, we will know how much private financing we may have to go out and buy. We don't have any sort of escrow account or set aside money currently to match. So once we have the bids in, we then understand what the sewer is going to cost, what we have remaining for stormwater runoff, what we're going to have to find for private financing, which we're going to try to do as we're moving forward, right? So we can, we're going to go to various banks and so forth and figure out, what interest is. I think Chris has solidified a number in his presentation. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I think we are, and maybe not doing a good example of trying to explain this to you, but I think we are trying to cover all of that for the member.
I think that what was said though in the conversation was that when this bond resolution is, if it's passed, and then we get these bids, that's it. There's no other discussion. It's going out for construction, and that's it. That was said tonight. There was not going to be any other meetings, no other votes, no other contemplations with members of the association. It was going to be bond resolution gets passed, we're going out to bid, we're going for it.
The sewer
No other
project,
discussion with anybody else, WPCA, no one else. That's it. That was said tonight. So
Okay,
you'll see it in the recording when you listen to it.
the sewer project alone is a final approval on the sewer project alone with this vote.
Okay, well,
That's correct.
that's not what was said when we.
Now,
took this vote.
you can read the bond resolution when you get it.
No,
it
but
will
that's
be-
not wasn't discussed when we voted on this at the WPCA. That was not discussed that way. It was
Because we
discussed that
only
this was
got
for
the
the entire
council,
project.
yes.
Well, that's.
We got the
obviously
council, excuse me, we
We
got the
didn't have
council.
didn't have the appropriate information, obviously, when we did this vote.
We didn't either because the WPCA had planned to have a second vote, but council said, we don't want to act against the advice of the bond council. And they said, you can't do it that way, but here's what you can do. You can have one vote for the sewer, must be one vote for the sewer, And they said there's some risk involved, but not a great risk, as Brendan Sharkey explained, because it's only internal to Old Lyme Shores. There will be a second vote, and it says it right in the resolution itself, for the storm drainage and any road enhancement, road reconstruction. Okay, thank you very much.
Just one comment, Bob, you have a good point. All right, we don't want this to have a cost overrun. We don't want to have a blank check, the whole thing. I think we should look at the numbers. I mean, whether we get these clean water funds or not is really going to impact how this goes anyway, as far as cost. So I think you said Kurt Mailman's going to show numbers, or at least Chris Shelton's going to show numbers. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah, I'll one other comment, Diane, sorry, just to
Please, go ahead.
I think there is no question, Bob, that the way the numbers I was coming up with and, over the summer, it's full intention for this to cover all three of the projects that we're talking about here, right? There was never, and to put a number behind it, I think that, the scenario where the extreme scenario that you described, which is valid, is that we haven't subsetted this bond resolution to the three projects. So we haven't apportioned $13.5 million for the sewers and $2.5 million for the storm projects, which is how we came to the number. I do think the scenario where the sewer project ends up becoming a over $16 million project on its own, you're talking, to put numbers on that, you're talking about another 20%, 19% cost overrun versus the estimates that we have now. And I'm not sure that the shared project, I think everyone's going to have questions, meaning all the other beaches, and that's a scenario that we're hopeful we don't see here. But to voice it out loud, that's not a scenario that I think any of us were really contemplating. But we need to get to the bids to kind of figure that out.
Thanks, Chris. Bob, you're talking, but you're muted. And
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm going to ask
Yeah.
that people try to limit on the topic if we can, if you want to move forward and not be here till midnight. So go ahead, Bob.
I get it. Yeah, I just think this is a very important thing because it's much different than what we discussed and all understood. Yeah, Chris, so I guess if it comes up just $1 million shy of that, and we have $1 million, that means this sewer project's going, if it's 14, or if it's 15.8, or it's 16.5, 200,000 under, the sewer project's going forward. That's what was said tonight. So this extreme thing can be extreme. If it's 16.2 or 16.75, the sewers are going forward at the price. That's what we discussed here. So we need to make sure we clarify.
16.75 would be over what we're talking about here. But I
Right.
think your point's
Right,
taken.
If it's just under the number, it could be just anything under the number, and there's no fail safe for us to make a decision. It's going forward. That was what was discussed here tonight. So we need to discuss that further. We need to put a fail safe. There needs to be a limit on what the sewers are going to be. It can't be just where we were talking about 16.8, and now it's got to be whatever it is, 4.2, 5.7, whatever. We got to come up with a number and put that in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would suggest, again, since that's an item for bond counsel to address, I would suggest you coordinate with Jack and Jay with those questions. And I'm going to ask that we were talking about the supplemental bond resolution and the one vote only versus the two votes, but we kind of got into a pricing discussion a little bit because they do relate. I'm going to ask if you don't have anything further on the content of the supplemental bond resolution, that we next go to the slide presentation with Kurt Mailman of Fuss and O'Neill, if that's okay. Jay, do you have anything further on your hand is up? I don't know.
Just to make the point, I think that was a big concern that I've had at the WPCA meetings, that the 16th that we were moving on this. The truth is going to be, I believe, that if the authorization passes on the bond resolution, it's basically first come, first serve. So what's going to happen is they're going to want to go out to bid for the shared portion fairly quickly. And then at some point thereafter, the local element of it is probably next in line, because that is mostly clean water funds, and there is actually a proposal from the Fuss and O'Neill to put that information together. And as the Board of Governors knows, and I think the WPCA knows, in order to move forward on the stormwater portion, which is included in the numbers, but it's also subject to the bonding, the bids. It's also subject to other costs, change orders, et cetera, that by even applying for the permits and the stormwater is going to be several months away. So the truth is going to be that by the time we get to the stormwater, expenditures will have already been made with regards to the shared, and with the local, that'll be much further along. And then that is the concern that I've had all along, is that I don't think that we want to keep coming back to the members and keep asking for more money, more money. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the WPCA? Any member questions for Brandon Sharkey about the bond resolution? Okay, then I want to thank Brandon very much for all of that information, and go next to the slide presentation, starting with Kurt Mailman of Fuss and O'Neill. The last part of the presentation includes frequently asked questions that are comprised of almost all of the questions that were sent to askthewpca@oldlimeshores.org. It's possible your question isn't in there yet. When they came later, they may not have been included. But I think you'll find it quite comprehensive. And Kurt, if we could start with you, and would you please provide us with an overview of your background before you start the slide presentation?
Sure. So as introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I've been working at Fuss and O'Neill for 32 plus years. I'm a graduate of WPI, and I'm a vice president in the water and wastewater group within the water and natural resources practice team, so to speak. And I have several years of experience with not only Old Lyme Shores and their wastewater concerns, but also Miami Beach, Old Colony, and also have interacted with the town throughout this entire process. So, you know, as we started talking about the presentation today, I was of the opinion like, oh, everybody's heard all of this stuff before. But then I realized upon talking to some folks, hey, like not everybody's been here for 13 years since this project got started. So, we started with Jim Zanovich and Paul Roween back in the day, rest his soul. So it's got a long history. I'm going to try to be as concise as I can. I love to talk about this stuff because I think it's really important, and I understand the impact to your community. This is the biggest public works project that you'll ever entertain, and so it has to be done right. So with that, I will try to share my screen, and hopefully this Zoom will cooperate with me. Can everybody see that? I can no longer see faces or people raising their hands. So whilst I do this, can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Thank you.
Yes.
If there's anyone who can't see it, please unmute yourself and let us know.
Okay, so the agenda for today is we're going to go through some of the history of the project, talk about, like, people throw around these terms like the shared project, the internal project, the Soundview project, all those things. We're going to touch upon those a little bit at the risk of being boring and redundant. We're going to talk about how we got to where we are today. Then the really important stuff, which is, how do the costs break down? And we've already had some discussion about that, and we have our insights into it that we would like to discuss with the group, and then talk about like what are the roadway enhancements, like another buzzword that's been thrown around. What do they mean? Touch on the bioxide station, and then talk about like what happens if this doesn't go forward. What are the risks to Old Lyme Shores, and also like how can we work together to reduce the cost so that it's a palatable per unit cost at the end of the day. It's super important to keep the cost down throughout. Hopefully the bids will be favorable. Hope is not a strategy, but we've used a strategy to get there, and we're going to see how these things turn out. All right, so why are we doing the project? So back in 2011, Old Colony contracted with their own consulting engineer. Old Lyme Shores contracted with Fuss & O'Neill, started looking at their various communities for wastewater renovation and how they were situated. And the study was done in 2011 for both of them. They both came to the same conclusion. I'm going to give you some reasons why in a minute, but they both came to the same conclusion that there is a community pollution problem that meets with the criteria that DEP uses. And their charge as an agency is to protect the waters of the state, also the environment and the public health. So, that's from whence they render their decisions and their enforcement, et cetera. So what was determined through both of those reports was that public sewers were the most cost-effective long-term solution. During that same period, Miami Beach was considering adding their infrastructure to the project. They did their own study and trying to get cost-sharing measures to share infrastructure was a viable solution for them. And so the town of Old Lyme also went through their independent process. They all came up with the same conclusion. So what does the facilities planning process consist of? It really looks at 4 major wastewater renovation alternatives. Individual on-site management, which is essentially the do nothing alternative. Everything is fine. Decentralized management is septic system upgrades in areas where there are nitrogen issues that would require additional features, a small miniature wastewater treatment plant. The next stage would be small community systems where a number of properties are connected via a small collection system and then transported elsewhere where there's a subsurface dispersal and treatment system that was evaluated in 2013, actually. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Cherrystone site was evaluated for that, but they found that it was inadequate and it was close to an aquifer that was used for drinking water for Connecticut water. And obviously, impairing that water would be a major concern. It was very expensive as an alternative. And it was ruled out by the DEP as a potential solution. So, like I mentioned before, the centralized sewer system was deemed the most cost-effective long-term solution, which is what DEP needs to confirm in order to fund the project. So this is a little graphic that shows you why there are issues in Old Lyme Shores specific to wastewater renovation. In areas that are close or tidally influenced, you need 24 inches of separation of what they call the vadose zone before it gets to the groundwater. And any obstruction like peat, or in your case, down on Billow Road in the eastern part of the place of your association, you have bedrock. And what that does is it mounds up the groundwater, which doesn't allow it to renovate properly in the soil. So that's a major concern. In most communities where they have issues with wastewater renovation and septics, it's because the water moves too slowly. Actually, in Old Lyme Shores, it moves too quickly. So it doesn't get renovated before it ends up on your neighbor's property. And so in order to have a code compliant system in your area, you would need to have, more than a quarter acre for each lot. And by that virtue alone, that would exclude 35% of the properties. So the density is too high. There's an existence of bedrock, which does not renovate. The water just flows across the top of it. And there are a number of other concerns with the sites. But we also went out and did some testing, and we identified various zones. We didn't, on our testing map, identify the actual locations for reasons of anonymity, and we wanted to make sure that we had covered the entire area to see if one area was better than the other. Theoretically, you would think that zone 1 would be the worst because it has the bedrock in the lower eastern side on Billow and all the way up to Bel Air, but also that we wanted to make sure that zone 4, for instance, north of 156 was impaired as well. Otherwise, you could reduce the sewer service area potentially. And so these are some of the results. And just the quick Rorschach test on this is everything that's highlighted in yellow is indicative of inadequate wastewater treatment, whether it be through bacteria or ammonia as nitrogen. Like I said, the groundwater moves so quickly over the surface, it doesn't renovate before it pokes out into the backyard swales. Okay, and this second sampling event indicates that by the massive hits of E. coli and other trace bacteria counts that indicate like poorly treated, either poorly treated wastewater or also some impact from other animals, etc. But you can see in all the zones we actually had hits, which was a little bit surprising to us at the time. And we had one TKN in the swale that actually exceeded the drinking water limit. So that's a serious concern in terms of public health, not just the health of the Long Island Sound, but the actual, the health on the properties themselves. Now, you have had public drinking water brought to most of the properties now, which helps with that, but still, there's still an evident community pollution problem at the end of the day. As evidenced, again, this is the third sampling event. These were done in 2011 through microwells. Fecal coliform greater than 2,000. Those are things that can make people sick. So you probably wouldn't want to be playing in some of those swales or playing in those backyards if they have surface water, because they're probably contaminated to some extent. So in summary, why did we indicate in our study, and why did others also independently indicate in their studies that there was a community pollution problem? Small lot sizes, shallow depth to groundwater. In zone 1, the average depth to groundwater is only 1.5 to 2.5 feet. It doesn't even meet the standard for any renovation. It basically flows out of the septic tank and into the groundwater and out into the sound. Elevated bacteria and ammonia hits, and evidence of nitrogen discharges. The precursor to nitrogen is ammonia. We got hits on ammonia as well. So again, the state's responsible to protect the public health and the waters of the state. And other associations, Connecticut, DEP, and the town of Old Lyme, got together over a number of years to try to, combine their efforts to make sure the project was as cost effective as it could be. What are the shared infrastructure projects? It's actually split into 3 projects now in order to try to take advantage of specialty contractors and bidding. The first project is the shoreline, right along the shore. It's a very difficult construct, and there's peat actually in Pond Road area, which makes it even more difficult. Plus, there's a lot of sand and very narrow roads. The pump station is its own project because that's a specialty item. It's built to be resilient with breakaway walls, and the actual first floor of that is elevation 16. So it's designed to actually accommodate any flooding, which actually the site that it's on has been known to flood. I've seen pictures up to 18 inches of flooding there. And then the third project is the force main, which goes from the the pump station all the way to East Lyme. It crosses the border into East Lyme here, and the bioxide station. So those are the three projects. There's also along this force main, there are two bridges that are being reconstructed right now, and there's a crossing of the 156 Amtrak bridge that's a component of the project as well. Here's what it looks like on the interior. Again, these aren't 100% accurate. These are more cartoons, but you know, the area here in the pink is your Old Lyme Shores area and how it fits in with the crossing of Sheffield Brook here, which enters into the shared infrastructure on the other side of the brook. Not to belabor town, I said the town joined the process, and they are close to signing the cost sharing agreement, which would enter them in with the three associations, but this is their miscellaneous area B, and these are the areas of Soundview. So what happens when it leaves and goes into East Lyme? I showed you the micro picture before, which ends up right here. Then it goes through a number of pump stations through East Lyme, Waterford, and then all the way to New London, where it gets treated at the PSNT wastewater treatment plant, which has a capacity of about 10.3 MGD. So how did we get to where we are today? Like I mentioned before, you know, Miami Beach and the town of Old Lyme did their own studies subsequent to Old Colony and Old Lyme Shores. Since the project got significantly larger with all those participants, and an EIE needed to be performed instead of a typical SEPA evaluation for permitting. In 2016, the cost sharing agreement was signed between the three associations, Miami Beach, Old Lyme Shores, and Old Colony. In 2018, DEP combined all the individual consent orders that were signed when their projects were when the project reports were done. They lumped them all together in 2018, February of 2018. And then in 2018 and 2019, the associations applied for clean water funds, and obtained that from the Clean Water Fund through DEP. And from 2019 to 2020, several specialty permits needed to be obtained, special use permits, also variances, and inland wetlands, etc., Army Corps. And we've set down the road of also beginning the permits for the storm drainage, both interior and then also waterward of the 2.8 threshold limit for shorefront permitting. So 2021 came, and everybody knows what happened in 2020. The bids went out and they came in significantly higher than engineers' estimates across the board. And, you know, there was a significant issue with availability of materials and contractors and inflation. So they exceeded the opinion of cost by a considerable amount. And the projects effectively went on hiatus while people tried to figure out how are these projects going to become more affordable, right? So in 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law was signed, and EPA funneled that the portion for water improvements through the various SRFs, or the Clean Water Fund in Connecticut, to help. And so they added into their Clean Water Fund program this additional affordability element to try to really serve underserved communities and to help them out and become more affordable. But unfortunately, the prices came in so high for the shared infrastructure project and the internal infrastructure projects that they met the EPA's threshold for affordability. So under that pretext, the DEP committed to fund with an additional, it's not a grant, it's a loan forgiveness of up to $15 million that we referenced earlier. And also, while this was going on, we worked with the various other associations and the town. Previously, the projects had everything separated so that it would be really easy to track things. It would be super easy to evaluate if there were issues with any of the individual pieces of infrastructure, but it came at a cost. So what we did was we eliminated redundant parallel pipes on Pond Road. We eliminated the flow meters that isolated, which was $360,000 just in flow meters themselves. And then also worked and coordinated the 2 bridge projects that are actually supposed to go to bid in March of next year. And then what transpired was that the intermunicipal agreements that were arrived at in 2018 expired. So the association set about trying to revamp those and also include the town officially into the cost sharing agreement. And they, their portion of the project is about 29% of the shared projects. So it's important that they're contributing to the bottom line. So, we heard a lot about the cost and financing breakdown. 25% loan forgiveness. That's that add-on. That's a limited time only. It's only committed through 2026 at this juncture. Not to say that it wouldn't go further, but that's what's in this Connecticut Clean Water Fund right now. And then this 25% of eligible costs, which is typical for a small community set aside. They are required to fund at least one small community set aside project per year. So you're in the queue for that, as are the other entities in Old Lyme. So they're lumped in together right now. The loan 20 years at 2% for eligible. That's the Clean Water Fund criteria. And then homeowners assessments based on, and we're going to talk about this in FAQ as well, but based on equivalent dwelling unit. So an equivalent dwelling unit is effectively in Old Lyme Shores. It's basically one building unit on a lot. It's not for vacant lots that can't be connected. It's really 100. I believe the count is 193 in the community, but it's essentially one house, and it's not reliant, and it doesn't depend on the size of the house or the occupancy of the house. And that was a WPCA policy decision that was arrived at long ago. Also, the cost from the house to the curbside is going to be the homeowner's responsibility. Those numbers will vary. Those costs will vary depending on, how easy the digging is, if there's bedrock, if there's high groundwater, etc. So we do budget that in to the overall cost. And so this is where we ended up. I think the important part is we've been tracking all of these various projects and where their budgets are. And Chris is going to show you some slides that have a little bit different total number. These are the numbers that we have. And we didn't put a lot of slush on, but what we did do, we put an escalator of 17% on all the bids from 2021. And then we also added a contingency at 8%. So all the numbers that are projected are in excess of 25% greater than they were in 2021. And there are a number of different items that can reduce particularly the shared costs. One of them is DOT paving Route 156 and doing the mill and overlay. That can save in and of itself about $1 million on the project. But again, we have to get the bids, and we also have to get a commitment from DOT to do that. But one of the items that was brought up earlier, one of the discussion items was related to, like, what happens if we cap out at the 16.5 million? Well, if the bids come in such that you're going to cap off at 16.5 million, I would venture to say that none of these projects will be able to go forward. If the escalation is such that you won't be able to build your project under your limit, I don't think Miami Beach and Old Colony will either. Okay. And so we looked at this with storm drains and without storm drains. Again, we've got a little bit different numbers than Chris. And and his is probably a little bit more conservative than ours. And with that, I will try to stop sharing and let Chris do his little presentation. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks. 1 second. Let me just, so I'm going to share the slide deck that we sent to the association. Share. Okay, so this is the deck that we sent out a few weeks ago. So hi everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Chris Shelton. Been a long time owner in 37 Sea Spray, and one of the reasons it wasn't the pay that coerced me to come on to the PCA here. That's a bad joke, but it was really just over the years, ever since 2011, there's been a lot of numbers, and you know, I just wanted to figure out an apples to apples comparison on all the different numbers, just so everyone has kind of a level set. If you want to run with one of the numbers or another number, at least everyone's got the same information. And so to Kurt's point, this isn't really a more conservative number. I'd say it takes Fuss and O'Neill, who is the expert on. So I'm not. These numbers don't make any different assumptions than the Fuss and O'Neill numbers on the engineering. That wasn't the point of this. I'm certainly not an engineer. What it does do is it takes Fuss and O'Neill's 15.4 million gross cost, and it adds in some buy-ins which are additional, which we have included in the agreements that we have with New London in order to receive the flow from the sewers, and also the East agreement with East Lyme. And so those two combined are around $636,000 for our portion. It's 2.1 million total for the shared. And so if you look at this slide, the top number, estimated gross costs for our portion, which is our sewer system, and 21.1% of the shared system, which is our portion under the cost sharing agreement, is almost 16.1 million. So that is our total gross project cost. The column on the right is the cost per EDU. So equivalent dwelling unit is approximately each residence, which is 193 in Old Lyme Shores. And so the figures on the right are simply the figures on the left divided by 193 all the way down this slide. So to dive in quickly, we've got 3 projects we're really doing here, or that we're aspiring to do here. The first is obviously the sewer project, so that's the shared project and the internal sewer project. Those two, that project in particular, as well as some portions of paving and some other things, are eligible for the Clean Water Fund, which includes a 25% of the cost in grant and 25% of the cost in forgiven loan. So prior to last year, when this loan forgiveness was available, we were essentially had 25% of our sewer project costs granted to us, and the remainder was borrowed under the Clean Water Fund for 75%. The new development last year was that 25% of that loan would then is eligible for forgiveness. I'll jump into the financing aspect in the next slide, but in any case, the net of those two, so those are money granted to us by the Clean Water Fund, means that the sewer project cost to Old Lyme Shores members would be about 7.2 million. Or 37,000 per EDU, which is just the 7.2 million divided by 193 once again. The embedded in here is the repaving as well, which we'll go into, and Kurt's got a slide on that too, so I won't dwell on that here, but we did get a number of questions, and I had the same question on what that was included in here. That is in there. We'll jump into it in a minute. The next line is the stormwater project. So this stormwater project and portions of the roadway are around $2.5 million for the stormwater. One aspect of this is this project. There is a subset of this project that is probably eligible for a clean water fund. I'm leaving that out for simplicity here. But about $2.5 million, a large portion of this $2.5 million is going to need to be funded by another source other than the clean water fund. And so there's some assumptions I'll jump into on the next slides for that. So all three projects, the third project is the roadway repaving. So that's sewers, stormwater project, roadway repaving are included in these numbers. The net cost of all three after the Clean Water Fund grant and loan forgiveness is $9.8 million and a cost of $50,795 per EDU. And so this is super important to me in any case, because it's all the numbers that are flying around are all correct. It's just a matter of how you want to compare apples to apples. And to me, it's important to understand what what number everyone is talking about. So hopefully that's helpful to people. This is the gross project cost. When we go to finance this, obviously we're not going to pay it, or maybe not obvious, but I think our preference is we don't pay this all in one slug with a big assessment. So we need to finance this, right? And so that's where I'm going to go to slide. That's what I attempted to show on slide 12 here. So these payments, and understandably we got a lot of questions on comparability between, I think, a lot of questions on the previous slide and this slide. So this slide is estimating what your annual cost is after financing. So you're paying down some of it works just like a mortgage if you're familiar with a mortgage. So the Clean Water Fund is offering us a 20-year loan, which we're paying down in increments, amortizing over 20 years, and they're giving us a rate of 2%. And so if you do, there isn't a lot of gymnastics on this, but if you do sort of that mortgage math, you're coming to about $2,100. This is per year, per EDU. All these numbers are per EDU because it's helpful to think of it that way. East Lyme agreement is similar terms, but separate from the Clean Water Fund. New London, similar terms. They're at 2.65, comes to $159 a year. So to finance annually over 20 years the sewer project, it is about $2,300 a year for financing. After 20 years, that those loans are paid off, and I guess we'd be proud full owners of the sewer project at that point. But that would roll off. The next portion here is obviously we're going to have some expenses to operate the system, and this is where. So these numbers are pretty ironclad, assuming I shouldn't say ironclad, but assuming the project costs come in at the gross cost from the previous page. Assuming that estimate's right, these numbers are known because we know the term and the rate. The cost to operate the system, we don't have a ton of great specific information on. I've heard a number of anecdotes on this. Some are from the town, from meetings with at the town with Steam Tsunami. There's some precedent from my own sewer bill in the town I live in as well. But we estimated this just to try and put a point on it at $400 to $600 to be determined. But that we wanted to include a fully loaded cost potentially estimate to our membership. And so for the sewer project, net of all of everything I just said, you're looking at $2,800 a year per EDU. This is for the sewer project. more than halfway home here. So that the next component I looked at, and this is where we get into, so this is the stormwater financing. So stormwater is also, as I mentioned, not ineligible for, is ineligible for the Clean Water Fund. And so this is a little bit of guesswork. And I, from where I stand now, think this is conservative, but it is a guess. So the way I looked at this is 2.5 million is the estimated cost of the stormwater project. I am in this assumption, assuming we can borrow for 15 years from a source, probably from a municipal bond or something of that nature. We'll have to investigate that. 15 years and the rate being 6%. There are definitely, this is definitely a guess. We haven't borrowed as an association, but the town has recently floated bonds of, 7 years, but they were in the 2s. I don't know that we would get where the town is. Old Colony has borrowed at favorable rates, although it was in a different interest rate environment. So I think 6% is probably reasonable, but it's a total estimate. In any case, assuming the 6% is right, and we finance 100% of this 2.5 million, it would cost about $1,300.37 for the stormwater project. I'll take 1 second and then one more slide and then I'm done. But part of what I kind of blew me away on that number. So the 2.5 million, it reflects how kind of favorable this, or the opportunity we have on this Clean Water Fund. I mean, the Clean Water Fund is financing multiples of this amount, and it's costing, it's costing more than this, but the relative is pretty appealing at 2%. So that's how I came to this $1,337 estimate. That is also amortizing. So part of this is you're going to be paying down your principal in this over the 15-year period. So that I think is everything on the stormwater. And then so that's where this is sort of the slide that compiles everything I just talked about into one spot. So this is slide 20. All these numbers are ones we just walked through. So you have the financing costs for sewers, the estimate of 400 to 600. I picked 500 for this slide. And then the $1,337 estimated for the stormwater cost. And that's how I arrived at the $4,131 annually. The one last thing I will say, so we did get a number of questions, and again, totally understand, and hopefully walking through this is helpful. Is this something we should multiply by 20 to get the full cost over 20 years? The reality is that since I assumed a 15-year on the stormwater cost, it's going to be less. It's a little more complicated than just multiplying this by 20. Happy to do that math if it's super helpful, but it does come down to the amount of the maturity you're able to borrow at and a couple of financing assumptions. But anyway, that I thought that was that's where I'll end as far as where the numbers and how these numbers are derived. These numbers haven't changed since the last time the WPCA meeting I presented this slide deck at. So they're consistent, and hopefully we've answered most, or if not all, never all, but most of the questions that we brought in. That's what we're aspiring to do here. So I will turn it back over to Kurt for he will actually, I know I said I was gonna jump into the roadway. He had a slide on roadway. I'll let him jump into that. Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. And hopefully I can get my act together here and present. Can everybody see this? One person just says yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so we looked at the bids and we talked about roadway enhancements. And
Oh, before you start, we have one hand raised, and Brendan, do you need to speak now? You have something?
I do want to just say one thing, because Kurt's and Chris's presentations, I think, are terrific and very well presented. But the one thing, and for those, I think, I don't think we should make an assumption that all of the association members are fully aware of why this is happening. Kurt addressed this at the beginning of his presentation, but it's very important, obviously, for the members to understand that there is a consent order that has not only been imposed by the state of Connecticut by virtue of the findings, the environmental findings that Kurt described earlier, but the association, along with the other beach associations and now the town of Old Lyme as well, have signed on jointly to a consent order, which requires a remediation of the conditions that are causing the poor water quality. And that is an enforceable action that this association and the others have agreed to address through this sewer project. And so, you know, Kurt's slide mentioned that in 2018 there was a consent order jointly signed by all the associations. That's binding. You know, that is a binding statement by the association and the others as well, that this is going to be addressed. So that's why this is all coming. This is not we're all trying to work together to address this, but it is an enforceable action on the part of the state to ensure that that these conditions are remediated. I just wanted to add that.
thank you, Brendan, and thank you for preempting the slide that I was going to show in about 4 slides. Perfect.
Sorry.
All right. So, so let me share my screen again, and we'll talk a little bit about the roadway enhancements here. So based on the bids from 2021, the DEP will pay for eligible improvements, and eligible improvements for them, they have a formula about paving. And you know, we bid the project out with bid alternates. The first bid alternate with just permanent trench patch repair, alternate 2 mill and overlay, and alternate 3 cold reclaim, which is like your roadway reconstruction. It's a sub base. It's, you know, putting a crown on the road that now slopes from east to west, that rides on the bedrock. It's cutting that out and actually making it into like a more substantial roadway. And just for comparison's sake, the difference between the permanent trench patch and the cold reclaim of the apparent low bidder was about $275,000. So like it's still a lot of money. Also, DEP may not pay for all of it, but they have intimated that they'll pay for at least the mill and overlay, so somewhere in between. So under this scenario, ineligible cost would be about $200,000. Okay, so they would give you up to $620,000 of mill and overlay, and then if you chose to do the cold reclaim later, then that extra $200,000 would be privately financed. Okay. And just to give you like a graphical representation of what it looks like, this is what you get for your permanent pavement repair, which is your trench width plus a foot on each side, and it really like no substantial road widenings, things like that, right? This mill and overlay actually gives you some ability to widen your roads because it gives you curb to curb, okay, and you get 2-inch mill and overlay, and I think that they would pay for that a 100% as eligible. So you get your 50% amnesty and 50% 2% loan on that. And then this is really the large enhancement where you're getting that road base at 8 inches, the subgrade installed. You're getting Cape Cod curbs, and you're getting two 2-inch lifts. There are some, I think, some speed tables as well that come as part of this this alternative. And so, like, our plan is to rebid that the same way so that you can compare apples and apples, and make a determination on what's best for you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the bioxide site. I know there's been a lot of discussion. That was approved in special permit. This is what it looks like now. Probably not today, but it's what it looked like in 2020 or 2021. This is a rendering that shows kind of what it's going to look like. Your Old Shores is going to be able, this shed here would have the bioxide station and components in it, which is really a tank and a small pump. And then this would be your replacement shed for your equipment. And so this was approved as a special permit along with the force main and the rest of the project back in 2021. So what's the risk of not proceeding? Thank you, Brendan. One of the things that's important and not to lose sight of is that the financing for the soft costs to date have been interim funding obligations through the state, and their payback for the shared projects their agreement ends in January 31st of 2025. So it's like in 3 months. If the projects don't go forward, the state is going to expect that payment to begin 6 months thereafter and monthly up until up for the next 17 years. Okay. Internally, Old Shores is on a little different schedule. Theirs starts in March, so it would be October of next year that they would be expecting payment back for costs incurred to date. One key feature is that since you don't have, if you don't have a project, if you don't have a benefit, then you can't assess based on EDUs. So the only way to recoup those costs would be through the general tax base. Another aspect is, to Brendan's point earlier, the unified consent order does not get rescinded with a no vote. If the projects don't go forward, you still will be subject to enforcement actions. Also, I mentioned earlier, that principal loan forgiveness is only committed through 2026. It may continue to be committed, but right now it's only in the Clean Water Fund through 2026. So there's a risk there potentially of losing that additional 25% loan forgiveness. Also, like the other entities, particularly the cost sharing agreement members, may be aggrieved that they have to foot the bill for the 3 shared projects. The BABA compliance isn't really a huge deal, but you were exempted from it because your project was prior to the BIL, was designed prior to the BIL. If you have to change the design significantly, you may be subject to BABA compliance. Certainly you would lose the DOT paving on Route 156, the ability to take advantage of that. And probably most importantly, the environmental issue, the public health, and the roads and drainage issues would not be improved. They'll remain as is in stasis. So how can we reduce the costs additionally? Like I mentioned, the DOT overlay on 156, we need to get an encroachment permit from them anyways. Old Colony actually owes the shared project a little bit of money, $265,000, that we're not really carrying through in your numbers right now, and your portion of that is 21%. So effectively $50,000 there. It's not huge. but they still owe it to the shared project, and you'll take advantage of that. And there's an opportunity, you know, we talked about the service connections. There's an opportunity for your WPCA, and you know, we could help with this to line up some mom and pop contractors to dig service connections to the stubs out in the street that get left by the public sewer project. Typically, it's a lot cheaper to round up 30 or 40 properties because you won't have to mobilize different crews and different contractors. So they could go to a WPCA meeting, for instance, and round up a number of property owners and reduce the cost of that connection. We've seen that happen pretty successfully in the past. Another potential savings, you know, you have a stub on Pond Road now that could be used by Hawks Nest or any parties further to the west. If and when they joined your system, then they would be responsible for their portion of the shared infrastructure, presumably upon their, you know, the proportion of their flow versus the flow that you guys have reserved. Also, you know, the town may have areas that they want to connect as well. All those things can reduce the overall shared infrastructure cost, which would then benefit all of the parties in the CSA. Also, you know, Chris talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, the Clean Water Fund has certain strings attached, you know, prevailing wage, other things. Old Colony has chosen to do their storm drainage project sort of on a parallel path, but using their own private financing and bidding it out separately. You may choose to do that. It's a really a policy decision on your end, whether it makes sense, and the bids are going to probably lead you to the answer for that. So, you know, those are some ways that you can knock that bottom line down, which is important to everybody's bottom line. So what's the schedule? Supplemental resolution vote. We talked about that ad nauseum today on the 9th of November. Rebid the 3 shared projects first, but in order to do that, the IMA has to be finalized between all the parties with New London. These are DEP requirements. Amended and approved cost sharing agreement for the town of Old Lyme. That's really to help defray the cost for the 3 cost sharing agreement members currently. It's not a DEP requirement. They will have to pre-approve the funding for rebidding, and they have to approve the contract documents so that they can get sent out for bidding. And then a major lift administratively for all the associations, including Old Lyme Shores, is to submit their Clean Water Fund applications for clean water funding for the construction phase if the bids are favorable and the projects move forward. And we put an 8-week, and I think that that's probably aggressive given history there, but 8 weeks for approval at the state. The state is committed and said that the projects in Old Lyme are their highest priority projects, you know, above and beyond, you know, the $50 to $100 million phosphorus removal projects at wastewater treatment plants. So they've stated that commitment, and, you know, I guess we'll test them out when it comes to moving the paperwork, if and when this project goes forward. So if all those dominoes fall into place, the construction would start probably summer or fall of next year. And the construction period's probably 2 years to substantial completion, but probably another 6 months or so in restoration after you're able to flush. This is just a graphic to show like some of the issues that there are with flooding and some of the reasons why, you know, storm drains are important. But also I wanted to caution everyone that, you know, even Mother Nature is going to take the areas back, the sea level rise, more frequent and higher intensity storms. You know, they're creating these flood events. And, you know, since it's so flat down at the bottom, you're never going to be able to eliminate all the flooding. But what you can do is convey it out faster and more efficiently. So, you know, that's the goal there. next steps, vote. And with that, I want to thank everybody for your time, and also transfer it over to Tim, who's going to go through the frequently asked questions.
Okay, and
Tim, do you
before
want
we
to-
start that, I'd like to read some ground rules and thank you, Kurt and Chris, very much for all the work you've done on this and you're presenting tonight. I know the hour's getting late. And I also want to thank Carolyn Camello, who has been working as an independent contractor, performing an incredible amount of administrative services for our association, and has done a fantastic job. So thank you, Carolyn. Before I move to Tim, onto the question and answer session, I want to just read some ground rules if that would be okay. We do have a question before we do that. However, we're going to wait to address your question. The hand raised, it says Brightwater. If you could lower your hand, we will come back to you as part of the question and answer session. Thank you. Now moving into the question and answers. This is an informational question and answer session only. Your WPCA, Board of Governors, and officers are pleased to serve the membership, and we understand we all do not agree upon everything. We ask that everyone be respectful, courteous, and considerate of one another. We are neighbors with a common love for OLS. Please follow some basic ground rules. Speak only when called upon. State your full name and your street name. There are quite a few people on the meeting tonight who only have an initial or some kind of secret code as to who they are. If you will need to state your full name and your street name. If you're asked to pause because others are waiting for a turn, please feel free, come back to finish your questions after everyone else has had their first chance to raise a question. Please avoid duplicating questions that were already asked, and please do not provide opinions or comments. This is an informational only question and answer session for members. If anyone commences with opinions or comments, we will raise a point of order for that, and we'll need to go on to the next person. So we will start with questions after Tim does his introduction. We'll start with questions from board members first and officers, and then we'll move on to questions from WPCA members, and then questions from all other members. And Tim, if you could please take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. I appreciate everyone's interest in tonight and all of the participants and so forth. And to the extent that the WPCA has put together a PowerPoint presentation, I want to thank all of the members and those who participated in the development of that. Part of the rationale, frankly, was to try to get as much information out that we possibly could and field questions. And we did that. We had Carolyn Camello aggregate some 37 questions. Those questions are included in this document. And so I'm wondering, in the interest of time, in as much as that the question is posed and the answer is given in writing, I mean, it may make more sense at this point to start fielding questions from people who are on the Zoom and let people refer to the frequently asked questions that were submitted prior? Or would you like me to walk through all 37 of these questions?
Tim, I think it's important to walk through the questions
Great.
first. Otherwise, it's going to get a little disorganized. You have them very nicely organized. You've grouped a lot together. They were repeat questions. So I would do it that way. And maybe you could sort of do it like New York Minute style. You know, if you want to read fast, that's fine. Because they will be sent to everybody afterwards so that everyone will have them in writing. So,
okay. So Kurt, if you can, I believe we annotated your slide to this. And I'll just read. My dog has to go out, so hold on. No, I'll read. So, first question: what is the plan if the vote fails? Potential loss of clean water funding, including the 15 million principal loan forgiveness. The Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection has emphasized that its commitment to taking enforcement action for noncompliance with completion dates outlined in the Unified Consent Order executed February 14th, 2018, and beach associations. The town of Old Lyme, New London, East Lyme, and others who rely on Old Lyme Shores Beach Association's compliance may also choose to bring legal action against Old Lyme Shores Beach Association. Significant increases in Old Lyme Shores annual taxes to include funding for legal fees, costs, expenses to defend one or more actions, which may take years. Old Lyme Shores Beach Association may lose one or more of them to have them pay for the sewer anyways, but a much higher cost and likely without state funding. Next. What will the total cost for the sewer, stormwater, and roadway be? The nominal estimated total capital cost for sewer, stormwater, and roadway projects is estimated at 16.1 or 72,000 per EDU when divided by 193 EDUs. Net estimated cost after grants and forgivable loans from the Clean Water Fund is 9.8 million or 50,750 per EDU. Quickly, we are looking to, we rounded up to the 16.5 just to give us some estimate room, etc. But that was to give us some cushion, if you will, against the costs coming in. What are the costs on a yearly basis? When financed with borrowing from this Clean Water Fund and additional private funds, the annual cost of principal interest per EDU are estimated at $2,294 for Clean Water Fund eligible funds for 20 years and an additional $1,337 per EDU for 15 years to pay off those borrowings. In addition, an estimated annual cost of 500 EDU is estimated to operate the system. All these estimates and much more of the information are illustrated on slides 8, 12, and 18 in the October 10th projected project update slides. The total annual cost per EDU, financing and operating for the initial 15-year period are shown on slide number 20.
Tim, can I ask a question on this? The 1337 is stormwater, right?
Can we
That's
back
right.
up?
Yes,
Sorry, Tim, yeah,
1337 is stormwater.
Correct. John.
So
Next. I only have half your slide, Kurt. Okay,
Can you see it now?
I can see the whole thing now.
Okay.
I'm on, is an EDU defined as a homeowner? An EDU is the equivalent dwelling unit. The Old Lyme Shores Beach Association, WPCA's policies to include each dwelling unit regardless of size as an EDU. Was Soundview's expected sewer cost?
So my question is concerning.
Was Soundview's expected sewer cost of $22,556 accurate? And is that because it's a smaller project? Soundview's project reportedly does not include short-term drainage and roadway improvements to the extent Old Lyme Shores Beach Association, and they have more EDUs in Soundview over which to appropriate costs. How does the total annual cost compare to MBA and OCBA? OCBA has a project lower cost than Old Lyme Shores due to higher density of properties, better soils, no bedrock. MBA's projected costs are the highest due to large lots and more difficult soils, bedrock, peat, in addition to a significant number of well protection requirements. Next slide. Our roadway enhancement cost embedded in the 16.1 estimate, is that included in the 4,131 per year EDU? The lowest grade of roadway repairs, permanent trench repair, are included in the current cost estimate of 16.1. Further roadway enhancements would be 250,000 above the current 2021 cost estimates. Has the town of Old Lyme Soundview not approved this portion yet? It's our understanding that Soundview has adequate approvals to construct their project and their portion of shared infrastructure projects. Does the agreement with New London require Old Lyme Shores to cover upgrades to their treatment plant? Yes, the agreement includes proportional statements for capital improvements by various parties based on their agreed upon flows. The associations are responsible for approximately 1.12% of the capital improvements. You have to move this slide up. Was the letter from the state? I can't see that. Was the letter from the state threatening the loss of 15 million requested by other beach associations? Not to our knowledge, is the answer. Next slide. Did the Old Lyme leadership advocate for the letter from DEEP to the town as mentioned in the day? In response to members at the fall meeting who stated that the Old Lyme Shores may not have to comply with the consent order, Tim Larson, me, as chair of the WPCA, reached out to the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection and the Attorney General's office to seek clarification on the consequences of noncompliance with the consent order. Why are Hawks Nest and White Sands exempt from the sewer project, and will that change? They are not currently subject to a consent order from the Connecticut DEP. There is a stub and pond road for another downstream entities to connect, such as Hawks Nest. White Sands Association reportedly may have adequate land within their association to evaluate a community treatment and dispersal system. Old Lyme Shores is bound to comply with the consent order, and we do not know when the DEP will take action with regards to Hawks Nest or White Sands. Next. What constitutes a quorum for the upcoming vote, and can a vocal minority determine the future of the beach infrastructure? 20 Old Lyme Shores Beach Association members establish a quorum, and a majority of those present and voting is needed to pass a measure. This means that if only 20 people are in attendance, as few as 11 could approve the measure. Does the voting process and schedule create legal risks for the association, potentially leading to costly litigation or even bankruptcy? No. The association has engaged legal counsel to ensure compliance with our governing documents and all applicable laws, rules, and regulations. Should specific notary guidance be provided in the special meeting notice for those needing to notarize the proxy form? The proxy form includes instructions and information for anyone who needs assistance. Next slide. How should the voting process be handled if more than one owner or proxy holder for a property attempts to vote during the Zoom call? There is only one vote per property. During the roll call, only one representative may speak and vote on behalf of a property. If multiple individuals attempt to vote for the same property, the property will be passed over and later given one more chance. If there are still two or more members attempting to vote on behalf of that property will be recorded as having a no vote. Should members start writing to state officials about funding shared infrastructure? The project already has received clean water funding from the state. However, if members want to reach out, they are welcome to do so. How does the meter measure sewer output? The meter measures drinking water estimates, the wastewater disposition of the properties. Next slide. What happens if a property owner doesn't pay the sewer project bills or hook up to the sewer? Would Old Lyme Shores place a lien and eventually foreclose? And how would payments be handled before the foreclosure? Old Lyme Shores will follow all rights and remedies available under Connecticut law and our governing documents, which may include, but are not limited to, having a lien placed on land records until the assessment is paid in full. The precise actions will be determined at a later time. If the cost per home exceeds $40,000, won't members reject it? Should the state be approached with these concerns before the vote? The state is fully aware of the situation. We have no plans to engage with them further until we either receive bids or have a no vote outcome. For protected project costs, please refer to slide 8 in the October 10 project update slides. How should ineligible costs be addressed? Ineligible costs are referenced on slide 18 of the October project update slides. Next. Why does the state expect 3 beach associations to oversee millions in public funds? Old Lyme Shores is a municipality in the form of an incorporated private beach association created by an act of the state legislature. So the state approaches the private beach associations as municipalities, even though they are very small as compared to the town of Old Lyme. There's more thought given to the town taking the lead and spreading the cost of the shared infrastructure across town residents. Yes. There are some recent indications that the town would be interested in forming a single WPCA with representation from beach associations. It's too soon to predict if and when this would happen. How would this project affect the association's research? Who will manage it if it proceeds? How will the project affect association's resources, and who will manage it if it proceeds? After the bids are received and before any contract would be awarded, Old Lyme Shores leadership can review and inform members of the actual costs and the effect on the association's resource. Old Lyme Shores may engage Fuss & O'Neill and or other firms to take prominent role in the whole process as they do for small communities. Role would include controlling construction, management, responding to changes in work, providing submittals, processing pay requisitions, etc. Page isn't filling up.
Let me back it up and go forward again.
Okay.
Good?
One more time. Why is the project moving quickly, and is it? Why is the project? That's good.
Okay.
Why is the project moving quickly, and is it to qualify for clean water funds? Why Old Lyme Shores is moving now is due to the Old Lyme Shores attempting to qualify for clean water funds that will significantly reduce the cost for our members for this project. Old Lyme Shores Beach Association is also moving now because the other beach associations that also agreed to do this, as we did in 2012, Old Colony, Soundview, Town of Old Lyme, and Miami Beach have approved their referendums already. Further, the loan forgiveness from the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection through the Clean Water Fund is only committed through 2026. Why is the project necessary if Long Island Sound has an A rating? The association is complying with the consent order from the state of Connecticut. Additionally, there's evidence of nitrogen discharges to the Long Island Sound, as well as bacteria hits, including inadequately treated wastewater within the association, which is a public health concern. Is it necessary to include storm drainage work with the sewer project, or could that be deferred to save costs? It is not necessary, and the storm drainage improvements may be deferred to save costs. The risk is that the roadways will need to be repaved again because the roadways will be improved as part of the sewer project. Will state grants or loans cover the stormwater portion of the project, or should that be excluded due to its high costs? Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection has tacitly agreed to a minimum of 20% of the storm drainage to be eligible for clean water funding. That percentage may be increased marginally, not to 100%, at their discretion. One more time. One more time. Okay. What are the potential consequences of Old Lyme Shores entering an enforcement action or litigation, and could it lead to an austerity budgeting? Yes, Old Lyme Shores Beach Association would likely need to go into an austerity budgeting, and any potential improvements and or beach maintenance could possibly need to be tabled unfunded due to anticipated or unanticipated enforcement actions or litigation costs. The alternative to what would be significantly higher annual Old Lyme Shores Beach Association fees to fund these activities, possibly doubled or tripled. Why is it important to proceed with a fully integrated project, wastewater, roads, stormwater, water, rather than picking only one element? There's an economy of scale to install multiple utilities between the roadways before they're improved, with the lowest utility, sewer, installed first, other shallower utilities installed as the roadway fill is brought up to grade. There is also financial benefits from the clean water funding, as portions of the clean water funding can be applied to stormwater in addition to the sewer project when done at one time. What are the critical steps for getting the system flow ready for first flush, and when do payments begin? Critical path items include obtaining consensus from Old Lyme Shores property owners to proceed with the project, bidding the project, finalizing the cost sharing agreement, finalizing the contract with Fuss & O'Neill for the internal project, applying for clean water funds through the Connecticut DEP, funding through the construction phases, awarding the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, and with the Old Lyme Shores constructing the system from the crossing at Sheffield Brook eastward and northward from the lowest elevation. Payments will begin once the project is complete. See slide 30 for more information on proposed timeline. And that is the end of the frequently asked questions. I think it was important, over the last several weeks that, as we were accumulating these and, for the purposes of this meeting, and I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, suffice it to say that if there are continued questions, if you could again put those in writing, and we will endeavor to answer those to the best we can, either directly or so forth. And so, Diane, I'll turn it back over to you for the live questioning and answering. And again, I would just say this is a forum to ask questions, and Chris, Kurt, and Brendan are still on the line. If the questions can be answered in a relatively quick dialogue, I would suspect that we could handle that. And again, if they are, not to put anyone on the spot, but if they do need time to get back to folks, I think that could be afforded as well. We do want to get as much information as we possibly can. Understanding that our WPCA was formed in late July, we've covered an awful lot of ground in the last 3 months. We're trying not to let perfect be the enemy of good. We're trying to get this under control. We still have a lot of issues that are remaining, and we're going to chip away at it and get this done in a professional manner. So, Diane, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start with questions from board members and officers. Any board members or officers, would you like to raise your hands? Do you have any questions for our presenters?
So this is John. I've got my hand raised. Tim, can you do me a favor, or anybody? I mean, maybe Kurt, you can answer this, or Brendan. What does a state enforcement action look like? I mean, I keep hearing about it. I hear it's fines. It could be financial. It could be otherwise. What does that look like?
You want me to answer that question? So DEP has some latitude in that regard. Okay. And typically what their enforcement action consists of is fines, and they can levy fines. Commonly, they levy fines at $1,000 a day, but they can be escalated for non-compliance therefrom. They also could issue an administrative order, which is different than a consent order, which then requires you on a certain schedule to comply, and they would have probably enforcement numbers attached to that and consequences. But they do have a lot of latitude. It's in the statutes what they can do. And if you'd like, I can send you copies of that stuff.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Another question for you regarding, or just a follow-up, if you will. if they do start with enforcement action of fines, and then they issue an administrative order, and we've already paid the fines, we won't get them back, I'm assuming, and we would still have to be required to do these sewers? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
After we pay the
I
fine.
have, so Old Saybrook, maybe I shouldn't say this in the public forum, but I'm going anyways. So Old Saybrook, fought, public sewering twice and lost both times in court, and they're under a stipulated judgment right now. They lost all of their legal fees, etc., but they, they did have a fund that they established to help pay for legal fees to, it was a substantial fund, but they, they didn't recoup any of that cost that they lost in legal fees, and they still need to comply with their stipulated judgment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Jay Moynihan has his hand raised.
Hey, Kurt, how are you?
Good evening.
Good evening, Kurt. I wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions on the spreadsheet for the dated as of September 4, 2024.
Okay.
Great. So I just want to make sure I understand it, and then I wanted to ask, it'll lead me to a couple others, I guess. So I guess the one I really want to kind of focus on is trying to understand, when you present this information, are you presenting it as a budget, or are you presenting it as kind of what you call an estimate of value? And the reason I'm asking is, well, I guess that's my first question. And do you see a difference in that?
It's an opinion of probable cost.
Okay.
For the project.
Okay, great. So you have, for example, on legal and administration, and I'm assuming this is for both projects, for us, about $66,000. Does that include, do you make assumptions there about the potential need for us, this project, to need a project manager, additional engineering, resident engineering, rate specialist? Is that all in that, is that in that number? Clerk of the Works?
So the legal and admin aggregate total is about 241,000, of which Old Lyme Shores' piece portion is about 53,000. That's really it's a rule of thumb number at 0.5% of the construction cost. It's not based on actual expenditures to date. Several legal opinions have had to be gathered throughout this process. Easements generated. Some money has already been spent to date on the legal aspects. So yeah, it's also bond counsel, right? So there's a number of different expenditures for the legal side. So it's just a budget based on percentage of construction costs.
So what you've done there is you've combined, just so I understand, the shared and the local projects and put a blocked number in, basically, or factored, right?
Yeah, 0.5%, right?
Right, okay. The other question I've got, but it's hypothetically possible that as the project goes along and either the shared project or the local project moves ahead and additional services are needed, that number might be too low, et cetera, hypothetically.
It could go either way. It
Okay,
could be
great.
too high, it could be too low.
The one I'm particularly interested in and asking you about on your spreadsheet is on your contingency number of 8%. When you did, and the reason I'm interested in is because the way I've seen this project so far, or kind of visualize it, and if I was a project manager, or I've had the opportunity to be a DPW director or a town manager, a contingency, first off, I have a kind of a sense that you probably couldn't put enough money against this project. But part of my concern also is to make sure there's enough funding, because as one of our members of the WPCA pointed out and wondered about sufficient resources there for all of the items that are included in our material, in our bonding resolution. And then I noticed that in your performance of in September of 20, and you had a contingency of 5% construction contingency. And in 21 on the bids, you had a contingency of 3. And I would have to say that if I had seen this project from a municipal standpoint, I would want to see, I would not believe that I could recommend a project going forward unless it had a minimum of 15, 20, 25%. I mean, this project is huge, $70 million, $60 million project. So I'm just interested in your thought process on how you block contingency reserve, why you thought it was 5%, 3%, 8%, when people I talked to and my experience, and I've checked it since with DPW directors, all have a much higher number. I'm just interested in your thought on that.
So typically, as the project gets more defined, the contingencies go down. So when we first start a project out, our contingencies probably in the range of 15%. And then when we go through preliminary design and we refine it further, like we bid these projects out as unit price projects. So we actually have in the unit prices some slush as well. And that's part of the reason probably why you'll see the discrepancy between projects at DPW level and the projects that we have. In other words, we're overestimating some of the quantities on purpose a little bit to make sure that we've got coverage on the contingency on the quantity end. So it's not just the percentage that you're seeing, but there's also contingency in the quantities themselves.
And so I'm not looking to debate it, although I would point out respectfully that you had carried 3%, thinking that you had, I assume, some degree of what you call slush. Not a good term probably in the public sector, but fine. And yet the bids came in appreciably higher at the end of the day than what was included. So to protect ourselves, I mean, from a personal standpoint or looking at it, my question is, or my thought was just that the 8%, and based on talking to other people in the field, was very, very low. So I'm just.
Okay, thank you for your opinion, but we're not giving opinions, we're asking questions and.
No, I'm trying to
giving
get to the
comments.
number with regard, just to understand it.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions?
I do. Is that all right?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So, Kirk, can this project be bid without the town signing the cost sharing agreement?
Yes. The project can be bid without the town signing the cost share agreement. Yes.
So my understanding up to this point was everybody needed to sign, the cost sharing agreement needed to be in place as a requisite for the state in order for us to go forward. That's not
for the state, for the
not
association, for the cost sharing agreement members.
So whether the town passes the cost sharing agreement or not, at this moment, doesn't really inhibit the opportunity to go out and bid it. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Does the project, is the engineering work that you guys have been doing with regards to, I think it was Amendment 5 on the shared, does that, and needing to do that in order to get the approval from DOT to do work in the right-of-way, where are we on that portion of it? Is that a holdup with regards to bidding at all?
They cannot construct any portion of the project without an encroachment permit. So DOT has to grant to the contractor an encroachment permit in order to have the contractor enter into the DOT right away.
So does that mean, can we bid it or not right now?
So we can bid it.
Okay.
But you can't construct the route, anything within the DOT right away without an encroachment permit.
Okay. And to clarify for people, the shared project, it's your understanding the shared project will be managed by this cost sharing group made up of the 3 beaches and the town with a representative. Is that, and the local project within our parameters, will be made up, overseen by WPCA Board of Governors. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, great. And have you ever done any, has Foots and O'Neill done any work with regards yet relative to what the potential rates would be for Old Lyme Shores residents if the project went through? Have you been engaged in that work at all?
Are you asking, I'm asking for a clarification. Are you asking about operation and maintenance of the pump station and the infrastructure, or are you asking about something else?
No, I'm asking with regards to what the cost potentially would be from an annual basis for a resident relative to rates, including O&M and fixed costs. Have you done, I don't know if you've done any work on that, so I didn't know.
Sure. Yeah. The associations quite a few years back actually met with East Lyme and their operations group, and they had a tacit agreement in place with some numbers on it for them to actually operate and maintain the pump station and the infrastructure, check on it weekly, and to to respond to calls, et cetera, et cetera. The number was very favorable at the time. I do not know what that looks like today, but yeah, there were definitely some discussions and some tacit agreements made. In fact, there were some documents drawn up that were drafted.
Terrific. And I just have two more quick questions. So this model has that we are potentially embarking on, assuming the funding is approved and we move forward to bid and award the bid, et cetera, is made up of the 3 beaches and the town. And then each of the other entities does their own elements. And so what I'm interested in understanding is, in your experience of at Foots and O'Neill, is there another, it does seem to me, or it seems to me anyway, our budget, our annual budget as an association is about $200,000, much of which includes beach maintenance and some other items. This is something dramatically different for us. Are there other models that you're aware of relative to the beaches and the town, or 4 entities into a contract and administering it, and then they're administering their own local public works and coordinating that? Do you have a model or something we could think about or review as we move forward?
What you're entertaining with the 4 entities is very uncommon.
Okay.
So typically, and probably the most efficient way to do it would be to have a single entity.
Yep.
The associations, and this is for most people probably know this already, but the associations were interested at one point in creating a shared WPCA, basically a regional WPCA.
Sure.
The charters of the associations are written such that it's not possible for that to happen. So the only entity that could, in fact, run all of the projects would be the town of Old Lyme, with representation from the different associations. We actually were participated and helped organize the regional WPCA in Bolton, where there are 4 entities, but they needed a sponsor, and the sponsor for that group, the financial sponsor, because Bolton didn't have a lot of money and the other entities didn't have a lot, the financial sponsor ended up being the town of Manchester in that instance, even though they were probably not as well served as the other entities. And Greater New Haven WPCA is a regional WPCA, which they have their own treatment plant. They also have their own infrastructure, but they have 5 other towns, I believe, 5 or 6 other towns that contribute. And they have a collective WPCA that is run through GNH. They're their own utility group, and they have their own enterprise fund, and they have their own WPCA with membership from all their member communities. But so those are the models. That would be the optimum model for Old Lyme ultimately.
Sure.
So far it hasn't come together, and the idea of having a beach-led regional WPCA is reportedly not possible according to the way that the charters are written.
Okay, and my last question, thanks so much. My last question is, I'd like to go back on making sure I understand on the illustration on Old Saybrook. So my understanding of Saybrook is everything you say is true, and I'm not debating it. I'm just asking to see if I understand this correctly. And everything you say is true, but but in fact, they have, as part of the process since 2009 or so, they have in Saybrook upgraded somewhere around 1,100 private septic systems. And as a means of enhancing that work, they have utilized both local resources, which included the town of Old Lyme doing a bonding to supplement the cost, and also clean water funds. And that if the way I've understood their process is if an average system was $40,000, they were utilizing a bond issuance from the town of Old Saybrook for but for 1/4 of the cost, and 1/4 of the cost was also being utilized for clean water funds. So clean water funds are actually being utilized as a means of enhancing or improving local septic system, private septic systems. And I'm just, is that correct as far as the information goes?
So, so Old Saybrook did get the bond, not Old Lyme, but
That's right.
They were the first and only project in the state of Connecticut to use clean water funds to fund on-site septics. They also had their own force account members that they used to actually help them do evaluations. The piece that I think the salient piece here is that they came to an impasse when it came to the shorefront properties.
Yeah.
And the shorefront properties are unable to be fitted with nitrogen reducing innovative alternative or AT systems. Okay. And so they've done all of the, let's say, landward lots. Now they're working on the remaining 740 lots, of which probably 370 of them are abutting either surface water or rivers, any surface waters. And those permits, I'm going to get into a long discussion here, but effectively they never came to a resolution with DEP to permit those types of AT systems. And some of the lots that are getting closer to the shore, the price tags were like $70,000, and they weren't even at the shore yet, based on what they needed for upgrades. So they did effectively all of the less complicated ones. The more complicated ones are going to be gathered up, and a community system is going to be is where they're headed. Right? They have two choices. There's a 2019 report that says we have two choices here. One is collect up 740 properties and send them north to a suitable site or suitable sites for community discharge, or send them all the way to the Connecticut River with a more conventional wastewater treatment plant. And so they're in the midst currently of evaluating suitable groundwater community sites, as are also the village of Westbrook and also Clinton. So they're all in the midst of this evaluation for community sites. And Old Lyme went through that process in 2013 at the Cherrystone sites, and it ended up not being feasible technically or financially at the time. So.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I just was looking for confirmation that they have the state did allow clean water funds to be used. And in our case, we have for septics, and in our case, we have 192 lots and 192 units. So we have one EDU per lot, where some of the other entities who are part of our consortium don't have that same arrangement. So I'm just wanted to kind of reaffirm what I thought I had understood. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm all set. Thank
Sometimes I
you.
get a little long-winded.
Okay. Say that again, Kurt?
I said, sometimes I get a little long-winded. I've lived a lot of this stuff for several years. It was back in Old Saybrook in 2009 when they were establishing their decentralized wastewater management districts. So it's it runs the gamut. You know, the solution isn't, you have all the tools in the toolbox, and every community needs a different tool out of the toolbox.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
We have another board member who has their hand raised, Mary Kate Reynolds.
Hi there. I'm not really sure who this question should go to, but is there a scenario that if this does not pass, that our private beach status could be in jeopardy? I don't know if there's any cases out there that the state held that as leverage. Is that a possibility? Anybody could address that?
Okay, Brendan Sharkey, are you still? Thank you.
Yeah, if your question is, could the status of the association as a beach association be threatened by the association's failure to go forward with the sewer project? Is that your question?
Yeah, if we don't, I guess.
No,
deal with it in
I
some
don't
way.
think that's a possibility, because the association was established by a special act of the legislature back in the 1940s. And that established the association as a municipality. So it is, like any town, it's all towns exist essentially at the pleasure of the legislature. But it's not within the parameters of DEEP's authority to somehow override or overrule a special act that was adopted, 80 years ago, and somehow rescinded. So that's set in stone as far as your status as a municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it seems to me the state has a lot of power. Even, the DEP is one element, one part of the state. But the state legislature could, I suppose, somehow, it would be very heavy-handed, but I guess it's not. It seems like they can do almost anything, and maybe could say, well, you know what? Forget all these private beaches. We never should have improved them in the first place. It was done by a special act. We'll undo it by a special act. I don't know if that's possible, but it just seems to me a lot of times that the government can have a lot of power, and it would be very heavy-handed and unlikely, but maybe not impossible.
I would not say that it's absolutely impossible. That's true, but I don't think there's any precedent,
Good.
Of the legislature taking an action like that as a punitive measure for the town refusing to do something that, the state otherwise wants it to do.
Okay, thanks for that question, Mary Kate. That was not one of the ones we had before. I appreciate that. Thanks for responding, Brendan. Do we have any other board members or officers that have questions before we go to the WPCA members for any questions that they may have? Okay, any WPCA members with any questions, please raise your hands or unmute and speak up, please. Okay, then hearing none, we are going to go to our membership. Please remember to state your name and your street address before speaking. Thank you. Brightwater, if you could please unmute. I just sent you a message asking you to unmute. If you move your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, you'll get a toolbar, and at the bottom mine's on the far left. You can unmute.
Yeah, I think I've done that. Is that correct?
Yes, you have. Congratulations.
Okay.
State your name and street address, please.
Sure. Paul Grammel, 33 Brightwater Road. I have a couple of questions. I'll just ask them both and let you guys answer. Is the full extent of the resolution you're proposing what's written in the slide deck? In the past, that was not the case. We received a very small piece, but as you probably know, the resolution is many sections. So I'm wondering if you're proposing to change or amend any of those sections. Then the second question is,
Okay, can we stop with the first one, please, and
Okay,
address
sure.
that?
Yeah,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Okay, if it's that's okay, I'll start with that one because just yesterday we thought the resolution was done, and when we provided bond counsel, with a last copy with some language regarding what we talked about earlier in the meeting. I don't know if you were here at the very beginning, but bond counsel said, no, you're not doing that, we advised against that. So it's still a work in progress. However, as soon as after this meeting, we're going to go back to bond counsel with some of the issues raised during this meeting, for which we thank everyone for their questions and input, resolve those, and the entire resolution, all the sections in full, will be sent to everybody. All members will have it. And at the November 9th meeting, we will read every word out loud. Someone will have that lucky job. Someone will be selected to read every word out loud. You can put on your earplugs, your earphones, or whatever at the time. But we just don't want anyone to say they never got to see the whole thing, that final resolution and what it was that they were voting on.
Well, I think that's a great idea because frankly, if you were to add just, 6 million plus to the original language, then you would be obligated to consider storm sewers, road reconstruction, and actually even water supply, which is irrelevant to this day because we've received it. But anyways, I think that would obligate you, and I think that's a good thing. In terms of clarity, not necessarily obligating you to it, but one way or another, I think there should be clarity. And I think there should be clarity to, if we're considering, and I thought the impetus for this new resolution was largely driven by the fact that there were a forgivable loan being added in. And if that's true, I think that some language protecting the association membership, which says something along the lines of, if that does not materialize, you'll come back for an additional vote, or this is contingent upon the fact that, we were promised this additional 15 million. My other question is, can someone talk to the logic? I've heard many, many times that this is all the beaches plus the town or no one. And yet we're doing a resolution for the town for more money. Town's not doing it. Town is somehow on a different repayment schedule than we are. I think that perhaps we are either all together and we're on the same repayment schedule, which I would favor, and I would favor maybe having this vote a little bit later when the town announces that they're going to do a new resolution. I think that would be a good time for us to do it. Before doesn't make much sense, but perhaps you have some good information as to why.
I have information on that, unless Brendan, you do, and you would prefer to reply. Okay, the state of Connecticut is not requiring the town to go for another referendum. The one they have covers everything they need to move forward. And the town has, I got Martha Shoemaker's signature. I saw it today. They signed the New London agreement and they're going forward. So they, so that we can go out to bid. And that's all I know. They're not required to do another referendum. And they were asked about that several times by the WPCA members who are in contact with them consistently. And they said, no, we don't need one. We're not the same as you. We're different. We're the town. We already have what we need legally in place to go out to bid and get the funding and be part of the forgivable loan, et cetera. So we're not their lawyers. They have their own lawyers, and the state of Connecticut has accepted that. So that's all I know on that front.
Okay, so does that mean that they're not receiving any of that $15 million forgivable loan?
No, they are. They are.
They are.
Yes.
But that's why we're going out. I thought we had to include our
Yes, that's
proposed
correct.
portion. So they are
That-
not having to do that.
No, they don't. They have a different structure than we do. They have their own lawyers, and our bond lawyers are not their bond lawyers, and the state is fine with what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. Any members with any other questions, please raise your hand. Okay. Okay, Marty Merritt has his hand up. If you could please unmute yourself and state your street address.
Hey, Diane, thanks
Your
you
street
guys
name?
for all this hard work you guys are doing. We appreciate it. Martin Merritt from 56 Saltaire. I have just a couple questions. So can we change this in Chris's schedule? If we do this resolution, can we change it to the 13.5, or in other words, just approve 3.8 million instead of 6.8 million, so that we don't, and Bob was mentioning this earlier, which I kind of agreed with. And I think the individual who was just speaking mentioned it also. Can we just approve the 3.8 and then just have the sewer project, the roadways and the other under a separate bond, just so this doesn't get, the extra monies don't get taken over for the sewers?
I'd like to just say that I considered Bob Palazzo's comments very important. I think the issue came up unintentionally when bond counsel advised, hey, you can't go for a second vote on the sewer, but if you want to, you can on these two other elements. It unintentionally created an issue that Bob articulated very well. So we've asked Brendan Sharkey to please go back to bond counsel, and Marty, you just proposed a new way that wasn't considered before. One way was to keep the current resolution, but have a sublimit in there that says, even though we're approving 6.8, we're not going to approve more than a certain amount for the sewers, and leave in everything else. Or we could do just the sewers only, but I think we want to do everything, because otherwise it's too, want to include all the elements and see what the cost is, and maybe put that sublimit
Well,
for the sewer, because if we don't do that, like was presented by Kurt and Chris, that we will have to do the whole go back again for another vote for sure. And it's just, everybody really does expect a full package. I mean, most people want the storm drainage. We will still get a second vote on it, but I don't think we want to do it that way, but we'll propose it as one of the possible outcomes for addressing Bob Palazzo's concern that was brought up earlier. Brendan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm not, as I say, I'm not a bond counsel. So it's something that, it's certainly worth asking what their opinion is on that. The only other point that I might make, if I understand the bond counsel's relationship, because they've got, they're working on the entire project with the various associations. I think just one thing for the association to consider is that if there were to be, say, a separate bond authorization for just the storm and road portion, I don't know. I don't know if that would be included in the arrangement that Carmody and Torrance has for their representation generally of the project. It might be that the association may need to have a separate bond counsel to do a separate bond authorization for those separate parts of the project. Just something to consider.
I just wouldn't want it to be construed by the town of Old Lyme and the other beaches that we approved a larger amount for the sewers than we actually did.
That's the point. That's the point.
And,
I thank you.
So we don't
and
want
by
to.
the way, bond counsel was invited to join us tonight, but unfortunately they couldn't make it. So it's too bad, because we could have had a lot of these questions probably answered live with them, but we will go back to them through our council and have an answer. And it will, maybe if we need to, we can even have another special meeting just to address this point. It might be something that would be worthwhile.
And sorry, one other question here. So we're right now, it looks like with the sewers at 37,000 per EDU and the road projects at 13,000, we're at 51,000 per homeowner for these projects. You add the financing costs, another 15K, and then you add the annual fees and of another 10K for the $500 annual fee. So we're at about $76,000 per house. In Tim's presentation, he said that we're not ready to go back to the state yet with any questions or any concerns like, hey, is this costing us a little too much, because we don't have the costs yet. But the issue is that once we approve this amendment, are we locked in and it's too late to go to the state to say, hey, these costs are getting a little bit high. So if, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse in a way, that can't we go to the state now and say, listen, these are our costs right now as a community. And then again, Tim's saying, no, we can't unless we go out to bid and we know the real numbers. But once we go out to bid, we've already approved this bond and there's no way to back out at that point. So it just seems to be like it's not in the proper order.
Yeah, Diana, maybe I had a thought there too, Martin, and part of it, and you're right. So if the 50 overall includes stormwater and other projects, but the sewer is 37, like you read. I guess I thought about the same thing you just said, and what I sort of thought about was if we were going to have to put septic in, I mean, I don't have a quote for every property, but septic's 30-40 grand is probably roundabout where it's going to be, and so that's probably what the state, if we were going to go back to the state, we would kind of have to say, look, it's gonna the costs are getting out of control because there's an alternative way we can do it. Obviously there's some prohibitions to everyone putting in septic, and that's part of the reason that the sewers got recommended. But I think one thing we need to get, sorry, Matt, Martin.
No, it's okay.
What we need to do is hopefully we get bids back and it comes in at 12. I mean, that's an unlikely number, and we can recut all these numbers again. And the design and Bob and Diane already went through. I mean, the idea here is that all three projects is what we're voting on here. We're going to make sure that that's reflected. But the idea is, if the sewers cost 18 million, we can't go forward, right? And I don't think anyone wants to go forward at that. And that's the intention here, or at least that's my version of the intention here. So I think we want it to come in lower. If it comes in at 18, then I think what you're saying, the logic of what you're saying is it becomes right. And I think that's when you start to get into, what else can we do to offset costs as a reasonable, reasonable ask of the state. Does that help? I mean, that was my logic anyway.
It doesn't help us because once we've approved this bond, we're stuck. So it doesn't kind of help us because the costs are already pretty high. Remember the 37K and the 14 to 51K, that doesn't include the costs to connect. It doesn't include the ongoing costs. It doesn't include, any of the costs we're going to assume as an organization, whether it might be legal costs, and bringing people to, for other people who don't pay. If there's 50 people who don't pay, that's all going to be borne by the rest of us. So there's quite a few costs. And this doesn't include any overruns. And I heard Tim mentioned earlier that maybe we get Fuss and O'Neill to help us with the billing and these contract and managing the contractors. Doesn't include any cost for that. So we I think we're all pretty confident that this 37K we're thinking of is most likely going to be at least 15% higher. And
I'm not that confident. I mean, maybe you're adding other things, but yeah. I mean,
Okay, fair enough. Maybe it isn't, but I think a lot of the homeowners are quite nervous that it's going to be a lot higher.
Fair. No, look, we're all homeowners by definition here.
So yeah, so it's getting, and the cost to connect, if it's 6,000 and then at the minimum, but the guys on Billow, gosh, they're gonna have to cut through that bedrock. What's it gonna be, 20 or 30,000 for them to connect? It's at a point where it's pretty cost prohibitive already. And it seems like it's at a point now where we should be going to the state and saying, hey, we're willing to pay our share, but we just can't be saddled here and just have an open checkbook that just keeps coming. We just don't have that amount of money. We don't have that tax base that a town does or anything like that.
Appreciate the comment.
Well, the question is, what can we do about it? It's not a comment. It's like, it's an action. Can we have an action plan?
If it's, what can we do about it? I mean, I think we have to see what this is going to cost. And if it's,
but like I said, the only way to see how it's cost is we've got to approve this bond. And
okay, if we can stick with questions, please, instead of, comments and opinions. Any other questions that you have, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Sorry, Diane, that was the question. That if we approve this, we can't, once we see what the costs are, we're kind of stuck. And this doesn't include the overruns. I don't know. It seems like it's getting to be a big number where we should at least have a conversation with someone.
Any other questions, Marty?
The documents that you guys showed today, can you send those to us have those available on the website or whatever?
Yes. Tim announced at the beginning of the meeting that we will be sending the slide presentation. And also we hope to be able to have somebody take that presentation, the audio visual, and prepare it in a format that would be put out on YouTube. And we can send the link to the YouTube audio visual presentation if anyone wasn't here tonight and wants to watch it, or someone wants to revisit it.
And could you tell us, if you don't know it off the top of your head, could you tell us what we're in for so far? How much money that if we pulled out of this project, and I'm not saying we are, I'm just saying if we pulled out, what have we spent to date and what do we owe to date?
Okay,
you want me to...
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris, if you want, but just keeping in mind that is not a buyout by any means. It doesn't mean we can get out of it if we just paid that off. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't assume that. Thanks, Diane. Yeah.
Thank you.
Marty, so this is as of July 31st. And I know there's been some more on the shared, but approximately. So it's around 660,000 on our portion of the project, and then our portion of, so the shared sewers have about 924, of which we're somewhere around 195,000 of that. So total, it's around 900,000 of our portion.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. I think Norm Yester may have his hand up. Norm, I don't know if we can unmute you or not, the way you've dialed in.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
So I have two questions. So one was, Brendan mentioned earlier the process for proxy voting. And then you said, well, we have something in place right now, we're going to keep it. So my question is, Brendan, was your statement on how proxy voting is done in the state of Connecticut, how we should institute it for OLS?
No, I wasn't stating that was the state of Connecticut. There was a state of Connecticut guidance on how to do that. It's based on the bylaws of the association as far as proxy voting is concerned.
The
Right. So
charter
you-
states it must be notarized, and the charter states that the
I'm sorry,
person.
I'm saying the bylaws, I mean the charter, you're right.
Yes,
I
the
apologize.
charter and the bylaws has a little section that mirrors the charter. But the charter does state it must be notarized, and the charter states it must be a member. Okay, and because only a member can vote at the meeting, then only another member who has the right to vote at a meeting can be a proxy holder for someone who cannot make the meeting in person. It's not a judgment call or anything like that. It's the way we've been instituting proxies since I started as president. We had analyzed it fully quite a while ago. It's the correct interpretation. It's in black and white, right in our charter.
So Diane,
So-
a member is somebody who's on a deed, is that correct?
Correct, yes. It has to be, so it could be any other member that owns properties that is on the deed, correct.
Okay, great. And then
Okay.
I made the mention about my wife's email address because I gave it to you and you said, yeah, it keeps getting bounced back and
It doesn't
And-
get bounced back. It does not. It says your wife is getting the emails. If you're not getting emails and you check with me and I tell you, well, look, MailChimp says you've received the email. It's an internet service provider issue. It's on the end of it's on the recipient's end. So you need to have your wife contact your internet service provider, or she can Google, why aren't I getting emails from MailChimp? And it will tell her what to do through whoever she has, because people have Gmail, some people have MSN, people have Comcast. It's different for every provider. It's generally called, you put them on a safe list so the email will come through. MailChimp is sometimes targeted by the internet service providers, considered a mass communication. So they will filter it right out for you.
all right. So do we know of the 192 members of the association, how many are not getting their emails?
Yes, we do. We know exactly how many bounced and who didn't get it. As far as if they gave our email address, we know. And that leads to a question that I have. I was going to hold my question, but let me first address the last MailChimp one that we sent out. We have 200, not everyone's a member of our association, by the way, but I think we have about like 270 email addresses, let's say, because a lot of households have more than one person that wants to get the emails. We had one bounce, and I could tell you who it was, and I didn't call the person because I know their wife got the email, but we had only one bounce, and it was called a soft bounce, which means they probably saw the email, and that's a very good record. By the way, but my question was, if you don't mind me building on your comment here, is Tim Larson, I was wondering whether or not we might want to try and achieve as much voter participation as possible on November 9th by maybe having our board members and our WPCA members, and maybe we have to get help from some other people who would attempt to call all of our members to make sure they're getting their emails and to make sure they're going to be voting on November 9th, because you have to be there. You can't do a mail-in ballot or email ballot. Someone has to be there, either be there yourself to vote when your address is called, or your proxy holder has to be there. So Tim Larson, if you're on and you have an interest in that type of, trying to ensure we get great voter participation by maybe making calls, the phone calls would only ask, are you getting the emails? Are you prepared to vote on November 9th? These are not phone calls that are going to answer questions or give opinions or comments about how to vote. It's just to get as much voter participation as possible. Tim, I don't see you, but please speak if you're on there. And
Sure, I got my hand up.
thank you.
I mean, obviously, we're all inundated with requests to come out and vote, and hopefully, our scheduled vote is much after the national election and so forth, but reaching out to 200 members and making
Well,
sure-
192, 100 or 93, 193.
my public school math. To our 193 members, I think if we can divide that up amongst our board members or solicit some help to do this, I know that local campaigns do this, et cetera, but develop a very short script and place a phone call to, pick a street, all of our streets, file through that in an afternoon. Should probably take us maybe 2 days at most to leave a message at 200 households. So I'd be willing to solicit some volunteers in that effort. And obviously I'd have to get access to some semblance of those, of a phone list, if you will, and try to attempt to make that happen. You know, maybe we could get our summertime volunteers to give them $25 to make these phone calls in 2 days or something along those lines.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. We have a 2021 print directory. And that's likely what we would need to use. Some people have moved out. I don't mind marking up the directory, or someone else can, to match the tax roll as far as who
I'll endeavor
sold.
I'll circle with you know, our membership on the Board of Governors and on the WPCA. See what the willingness is there. If we
I think we should hire somebody, frankly. I mean, maybe even, you know, just
Sure.
I think so. Yeah, if you could circle back to the WPCA and, you know, come up with something, that would be great. And we should go out and do that.
Great. Thank you.
Norm, please continue.
That was it. I only had those 2 questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised. Please unmute yourself and speak if you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Mike has a question.
Okay, Mike, go ahead, please.
Hey, how are you guys? Just 2 simple questions about the actual construction. And Martin kind of touched on one of them in regards to hookups and the hookup costs. In the breakout right now, it averages somewhere around $6,000. And I know that varies a lot per house, but I deal a lot with septic companies. I deal a lot with drainage companies. And so I've reached out to a few of them just to kind of get more ballpark figures on what things like that would cost. And all of those guys, you know, all of the numbers for the easy ones come back with, you know, 10, 11 grand. And they're figuring if there's any sort of rock and ledge, it's going to be 2 to 3 times that cost. So you just want people, my question, I guess, was where did you get the low figure of $5,000 to $6,000 to hook up when it's likely going to be a lot more than that, which adds to obviously the total cost of everything we're paying for. And then my other question was, in regards to the blasting of the roads, I remember years ago when VMS construction, you know, put in all the water lines in the road, I had a conversation with the guys that were actually doing the digging. And, you know, they were talking about they'll go out for bid to the project of the sewers, but how much blasting it's going to require is going to be pretty substantial. And when you have blasting of, you know, of that magnitude, there's going to be some, if not a lot, of collateral damage. And as we know, a lot of these houses are 80, 90 years old, supported by brick piers. So my question is, you know, when piers start to move and foundations start to crack and drywall starts to open up and the interior finishes that a lot of people have spent a lot of money on to make very nice start to become damaged, who then is responsible for repairing things like that?
So I can address those questions, Mike. So thank you for bringing those questions forward. I'll answer the first question first, which is like, how much does it cost to go from your service connection to your building? The houses in Old Lyme Shores. Let's leave the ones with bedrock aside for a minute, okay?
Sure.
The houses are fairly close to the road, so there's not that much distance.
But a lot of the pipes exit the back side of the lot, so they'll have to wrap around.
Yeah, we actually solicited everyone's and got them to sign a paper stating which way they were going to route their sewer, so they could have a location on the map, so the contractors could put the stub in the right place.
Sure.
So is that number light? Perhaps it is. Certainly with the bedrock, yes, it is. And like I said, you can get an economy of scale by not doing these onesie twosies, but getting like 20 or 30 people together.
Yeah.
And then you save, because a lot of that cost is mob and demob. They've got to bring their flatbed out,
Sure.
put their equipment out, so on and so forth. If they have a staging area and can do 20 or 30 of them, you can reduce that cost.
Sure.
Is it going to be a reduction of 4,000? I think we're going to find that out. I'm not sure what that is.
Right. I just, with the full breakout, you just want people to be aware that, yes, 5, 6 is kind of low. It could be substantially more than that. You know what I mean?
So, yeah. And I know that people have asked individual contractors to give them quotes on their properties already. like several years ago, and it ran the gamut. You know,
Sure.
there were lots of different prices given, but the bedrock will certainly increase the price of those homes. We are, to answer your second question, in the bid documents, there's like a pre-construction survey that gets done on all the properties. It's the contractor's responsibility. And so if there's a claim for disturbing the, you know, the stones that are somebody's foundation, for instance, right, or cracks in the walls, or all those things, those get handled through the contractor. So they'll go out and actually video it. It's more for their benefit actually to do it anyways. But the other thing is, like, blasting out there with those houses on those types of foundations is probably generally not a good thing to do. Usually they'll use a pneumatic hammer, which is, you know,
Yeah, that's what they did with a lot of the water lines. But the sewer lines, to my understanding, have to go deeper than the water lines. And I mean, I was talking to the guys that were out there doing it, and they were saying we're going to have to blast a lot of this. It's going to be, and they're going to have, and they also mentioned they're going to have to disconnect the nice new water lines that they put in to get a lot of those pipes deep enough, and have to redo those. I mean, I understand that's not.
Well, I would say the positive news for you is that the sewers are fairly shallow. They just need to get underneath the water and the storm drainage, because they all go north to south, right? When you have really deep sewers, it's because you have hills and valleys that you have to go through. Everything goes north to south, so it doesn't have to be as deep as a typical sewer would be. And we kept it up as high as we could, and still get the other utilities across it. So, I don't think that they're going to be able to blast. Particularly, you've got the water main proximity. You've got all the water services that are running across there already. And so, like, they're going to probably have to do it with a pneumatic hammer. Down 6 feet, it's going to take a while, but it's only in those isolated spots along Billow on the east side, and then probably the southern part up to was it Brightwater there. Those are the place where the bedrock is most prevalent. So, it's going to be slow go through there, and they're going to reflect that in their cost, actually.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Got it. Okay. Thank you for your explanation.
Thanks, Mike. Do you have any other questions?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Kathy Olson, you please unmute yourself.
Diane, I listened to your idea of making all the phone calls. You've got over 50 people on this call tonight, which would mean everybody on the call should know enough that to vote on the date, the November 9th date. So that would save you contacting 50 people if you can identify some of the names that aren't totally clear. And rather than paying somebody to do it, I would suggest maybe going down a list and neighbors, checking in with neighbors. But it seems like an added expense. My other concern is getting
by the way, before you go to your next concern, before I forget, I got an email from one of our members who said, well, wait a minute, why don't we just send an email out and ask people, are you getting our emails and you're planning to vote on the 9th? And that will eliminate probably over like 150 people, and we would only have to call maybe, 40 or 50. So if you follow
my other concern is not getting the correct password to get to these meetings, because it took me 15 minutes, and then I got an email from other members saying, are you having the same problem I am? I tried dialing in with the wrong password. So if somebody an hour or two before the meeting could update the password, it would be helpful to those of us who are having trouble getting in, because we're missing the first 15 minutes of the meeting.
Yes, we apologize for that. We did start at we didn't call the meeting to order till 7:12 p.m. So I hope you didn't miss too much. We just have technical difficulties. The pass code was tested. I tested it yesterday, actually, way before the meeting. I don't know what went wrong, other than when I looked today on the Zoom, it was a different passcode for the meeting. And it was probably just, it's a typographical error, I would say. We still need a secretary for our association. I'm performing a lot of functions. I'm the president and also doing the secretary. I do all the MailChimp, I do all the emails, I do all the meeting notices, including if there's a typo, it's my fault because I'm the one who put it in there when I set up the meeting in Zoom. So I apologize for that. Doing the best we can, and we appreciate your input. We always do test ahead of time. We tested about 15 minutes ahead, about 6:45 today, and and noticed the problem right away and got on it and sent an email to all members. I went into MailChimp. Everyone should have gotten an email from the president that said new passcode in bold and gave the new link with the passcode. And anyone who wants to be secretary, we're taking applications, please.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for those who don't know, Kathy's our parliamentarian. She keeps us in good order all the time. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. I think Marty Merritt has a question. Before I go back to Marty, like I said earlier, if there's anyone else waiting, we'll take their question first. And if no one else is waiting, I'd like to go back to Marty Merritt. Are there any other questions before I go to Marty? Okay, Marty, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Hi, Diane. Again, yeah, thanks for all the work you do. Gosh, being secretary and doing all those things. Thankless job that you do. But thank you for all that.
Well, thank you for thanking me.
But so, okay, and hearing Mike a little bit, and we're looking at the costs now. So the sewers are 37, the roads are 14, the financing costs are about 15. The costs of the annual, the $500 annual, over 20 years is 10. That gets us up to 76,000. The cost to connect, again, hearing Mike's things, let's say it's 12, that's 88,000. And that's without any overruns. That's without hiring Fuss and O'Neill. That's, to help us with some things. So we're getting close to $100,000 a house here. And to me, that would appear that we're at a point where we should definitely be having a conversation with the state.
That was one of the facts, and the answer is in the facts. I don't know if you missed that part, but
well, no, I heard it, and Tim said we haven't gone to the state.
Okay, but that is your opinion. Do you have a question? Because that's an opinion.
The question is that should we go out, because at $100,000 per home, it appears that we're in an economical situation. So are we at a point now where we should be going to the state and saying that, hey, this has become a little uneconomical for us, and I don't think you expect homeowners to pay $100,000 per home?
If Tim Larson or Chris Shelton or Kurt Manley would like to address the question, or if you just want to refer back to the fact with the answer there that said we had no plans to go to the state unless we got a no vote. I think that's where we were on it, but
well, sorry, Diane, one other thing, Kurt had a very interesting thing. He said, hey, we'll approve 13 million. We talked about what if we would approve the 16 million compared to the 13 million. And said, well, if we approve the 16 million and the sewer bids came out at that, we would definitely back off. Well, you know what the difference in cost to us is between 13 million and 16 million? To us, it's about $10,000. It's about $8,000 a homeowner. It goes from 33,000 to 41,000.
Maybe Kurt wants to address your question.
Excuse me, Diane. Sorry. It goes from 33,000 to 41,000. And now we're talking about so Kurt was like, oh yeah, we would definitely go back. We'd have been in a position to pull out then. But here we are talking about $100,000 per house. And we're not sitting here talking about, hey, we'd be in a position to go to the state now and say something.
Right. We hear you, and I'm going to let Kurt address you gave your opinion, which was.
I just want to clarify what I said. What I said was if the numbers come in extremely high, that all the associations will have a hardship and they won't want to proceed forward. That's what I said. I didn't mention the number. I said if they come in high, if the numbers come in, if the bids come in excessive, then none of the associations will want to proceed forward. That's what I said.
Okay.
I thought when you said that, Kurt, you were referring that, hey, gosh, we approved the whole amount, and that's what the if we approve the whole 16 and that's the sewer bid came out at, we wouldn't go forward at that point.
No, well, that wasn't.
What's your opinion of that?
The videotape on that, but what I was saying was that the other associations are effectively looking at the same range of increase in costs, and if the increase in costs are significant, the same way for Old Lyme Shores as they would be for Miami Beach and Old Colony, then collectively they would all likely say we can't move forward, and that would certainly be a point where you would go back to the state and any other agencies that you could get their ear of and tell them it's not affordable.
And you don't have an opinion of what that amount would be?
Well, we won't know until the bids come in, and so that's the whole premise, right? Is to try to get the bids so that you know where you stand in terms of the overall cost.
Okay, well, thank you for.
All right, Marty's hand is up. Do you have any other questions, Marty?
No, I don't. I forgot to take it down. Sorry about that.
That's all right, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, but I just want to give one more opportunity. I know it's late. All of you people who are still on, you have tremendous staying power, and thank you for attending this meeting. Tim Larson's hand is raised.
Thanks, Diane. I just wanted to once again thank you and the Board of Governors and the WPCA folks. This has been a very long and windy road, and I respect everyone's opinion and to the perspective that we have obligations. We have a consent order that we need to fortify. Much of what we need to do, frankly, is dependent upon bid numbers. In order to get a bid number, we need to get our ducks in a row, and then, you know, we can proceed on parallel tracks. But I just, to Diane's point, I think she's done a Herculean job in trying to keep our association on track, on board. And I've been in government for 25 years in my life, and I cannot thank her enough and appreciate her intensity and the value that she brings to our association. And I hope members truly appreciate the effort that we're all trying to get to. And you know, we have openings on this, but it does not even also preclude members from, maybe you have a banking relationship with somebody that we should investigate. Maybe you have contractors that you know. Those are the types of things, the influences that we can put upon ourselves in this project to try to work together to reduce the cost. But I just wanted to put a shout out again to Carolyn Camello, who has been our clerk and secretary for the WPCA. She's done a remarkable job. Chris Shelton has done a remarkable job in trying to carve out and cultivate a reasonable expectation. And again, all of these are estimates. And, you know, we are obligated by this consent order. And I think until we get bids in and we know exactly where we are, you know, we're going to have to make adult decisions once those numbers come back, and then we can continue with the conversation. And I wanted to thank both Brendan and Kurt for their availability. And we're going to try to convert this meeting over to a YouTube situation and email it back to everybody, so those people who have not been able to view this can get some information. We're doing our level best to answer these in a very professional manner. So if you do have questions, please continue to submit them. I think we did a very good job with answering the questions that were presented. So thank you all very much. Good night. Thank you again, Diane, for all of your effort. You should be commended.
Well, no, thank you, Tim Larson, and thank you for thanking everyone, because now I'm going to do the same thing with Kurt and Brendan and Chris and Carolyn. And I want to thank all of our past and our current WPCA volunteers who have worked so hard, for some of them for many years, some of them just for a few months, but we've all come together. We're an amazing association with a fantastic group of people, all who have the best interests of our members in mind. We are all members. So when you hear someone say, oh my God, you know, they're forcing this on us, none of us are forcing anything on anyone. We are complying with the consent order. We're doing the right thing for our association. We have legal counsel. We've done everything possible to ensure that this is whatever's decided, when you go to vote, that you have all the information you need to make a decision that will be best for our association. Paul Yellen, I see you. Would you like to say anything, our vice president?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
Diane.
well,
Thank you.
again, thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to look for a motion. You know, after we had this extraordinary amount of information and staying so late, thanks again to everyone, attendees, all volunteers, speakers, etc. Please, I'd like a motion first from
Motion
the
to
Board of
adjourn.
Governors to adjourn.
Tim
Second
Larson.
it.
Okay, all in favor, board? We got you.
Yes.
WPCA, motion to adjourn, please.
So
Motion to
moved.
adjourn.
Seconded.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? We know you are.
Aye.
And everyone have a great evening. Take
Diane,
good
I'm gonna
care.
need the link. I'm gonna need the link to.
Okay,
copy
it won't come for a few hours, so you'll
That's
probably
okay. I'll
won't get
pick
it
it
till
up
the
in the morning
morning.
and we'll work on it tomorrow.
Okay. It
Thank
takes a
you.
long time for Zoom to prepare it. Thanks so
Thank
much,
you so much.
Thank you
everybody.
guys for all your hard work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, Brendan, Kurt.